Welcome to this XXL landscape photography course for beginners. In the next few hours I will teach you everything you need to know about landscape photography. The right equipment, theory like image composition, visualization and practical examples for photographs with a wow effect. My name is Benjamin Jaworskyj and I've been photographing landscapes now for over a decade. I love it, it's my favorite genre and I want to share with you my techniques and tricks that you can take amazing landscape photos as well. We released a course about 5 years ago, filmed in beautiful Norway, and it's now time for an update. The great thing is, if you buy this course, you will get the whole Norway lessons as well as a bundle for free, so you have double the amount of knowledge. So let's get started with the first lesson.
This video is brought to you by
Auckland Photographer's Clothing.
Welcome to this XXL Landscape Photography Beginner course. Over the next few hours, I want to teach you everything important you need to know to get started with landscape photography. I've been photographing landscape for over a decade now, and I've been to many amazing places all over the world with my camera. I filmed my first English landscape photography course almost 5 years ago in Norway, and now it's time for an update. The special thing about this course, just like with my photography basics course, is that after around 2 years, this whole course here will be available for free on YouTube. As kind of my legacy for all those who want to realize their passion but may not have the financial resources to buy a full course. Every month there will be one part of a lesson. You can decide for yourself if you want to support our work and buy the full course, watch it immediately and at your own pace of course, or wait for 2 or more years until the whole course here is fully published on YouTube. With a purchase, you also get the classic course from Norway worth $49 for free, which means you benefit twice with the purchase. And I would like to thank you at this point now for your support already. On YouTube also you have to search for the videos and do not always find everything you look for directly because the algorithms filter everything, and here in the course you have everything nicely prepared, sorted and structured for an optimal learning success. Since I myself sell photography accessories such as filters, tripods and clothing through my stores, as well as use certain camera brands and lenses for years, I need to point out now in advance that I cannot be completely objective. And I will always tell you my subjective own opinion and experiences. All products that I use for my work I use for a good reason, and maybe you will also like them. But of course you can apply everything that I say and explain to you to other manufacturers of accessories, cameras and lenses. I would say we start with the first lesson and the first step on your way to fantastic landscape photos. The right camera for landscape photography. First of all, the right camera for everybody does not exist. Currently, I use the A7R5 from Sony with 61 megapixels. But this is a professional camera that costs €4,500 or around $4,000. Also for half of the cost or even less, you can find great full-frame cameras that are absolutely great if you just want to take photos. I've also worked with 24 megapixels, 33, 42 and even 100 megapixels in the past. In the end, it's all about your personal budget and what you want to do with the images. I, as a professional, use high resolution because I use the images in many different ways and also sell them or use them for printing projects. Do you also want to print your photos? Then you should definitely have at least 24 megapixels. Better even a bit more if you want to go a bit bigger. Depending on whether you use full frame or a smaller APS-C sensor or maybe even micro four thirds, the focal length you need will change. More about this in the lens section of this course. Most cameras from Canon, Nikon, Sony and the other big manufacturers are all very good and differ only slightly. Sometimes the one has better video features, sometimes a better autofocus or other display. Purely for photos, relatively little has changed in the recent years. Primarily look for your budget in the beginning and not necessary for the newest tech. For the start, $1,000 to $2,000 you get a really good full-frame camera, and for half the price a good APS-C camera with a smaller sensor. Don't buy the cheapest camera, but also you don't need to overpay for the most expensive stuff in the beginning. Lenses are usually more important than the camera itself, because they make the actual look. Wide-angle lenses, for example, let you get a lot of landscape on a photo. Telephoto lens let you zoom in so that you have only a small part of a landscape on the picture. Depending on the subject and what you want to achieve, you take one or the other. In the end, your camera only captures what the lens sees. Many lenses of the major manufacturers are very good and usually relatively expensive if bought brand new. But lenses can be bought used as well, because they usually outlast the camera's lifespan. Since you can change the lenses on real cameras, unlike with smartphones, you can buy yourself a new camera and still continue to use your older lenses. Or you can sell a camera one day and a lens on another day, and get a new camera and then a new lens and then maybe a new camera and keep the lens and so on. With the real cameras, you can change the lens from wide angle to telephoto and the other way around. I personally only use two lenses most of the time for landscape photos. 90% of the photos I take are made with a 16 to 35mm lens. If you have an APS-C camera, you need about 10 to 20mm lens to achieve the same view, because APS-C cameras have a so-called crop factor due to the smaller sensor size. If I put my 16 to 35mm lens on an APS-C camera, it looks less wide angle than with my full-frame camera, because the sensor is smaller and the image is cropped. To get the same view as I do with my full-frame camera, I need a more wide-angle lens. That's why I say 10 to 20mm. You can use full-frame lenses on APS-C cameras, but the disadvantage is that you don't have the full wide angle. But the advantage? You switch maybe from APS-C to full-frame in some time, you can continue to use the same lens on a different camera. The other way around, you can't use APS-C lenses, especially wide-angle APS-C lenses, on full-frame cameras. The diameter of the lens glass from the back is too small and you can see actually through the large sensor into the lens. Some full-frame cameras can be digitally converted to APS-C to make this match. But this is only artificial and you have less megapixels because you only use a small part of the sensor. So check what lens you are buying exactly and if it fits your camera sensor size. Again, I use 16 to 35mm lens on a full-frame camera. On APS-C this would be 10 to 20 or 11 to 60mm depending on the manufacturer and the zoom range offered. A lens with this focal length can be used at 60mm full-frame for, let's say, big mountains, or to get distortions in the image like a blown-up foreground. You can also zoom in to 35 if something is further away or you want to compress the image. All in all, a good focal length range for landscape photography. The second lens I use, but maybe only for 10% of my images, including wildlife, is a 70 to 200mm lens. Again, this is related to full-frame cameras. With an APS-C camera, this would be something around 50 to 130mm lens, because you have to take in account the crop factor of the APS-C camera. I use that longer focal length for distant motifs, such as castles or mountain peaks, that I want to stand out from the scene. Not the whole landscape, but only a part of it, as format filling as possible. With lenses, there are some other differences beside the focal length. For example, the maximum open aperture. This means how much light hits the sensor through the lens. This makes sense for low light shots because you can keep the ISO number lower and have more light available. With wide-angle lenses, this is often an aperture of 2.8 instead of 4.0. For example, here, this is a 16-35 2.8. And this is a 16-35 4.0. The focal length and image you get are identically on both, but the aperture is a bit wider here, 2.8. So I can take better pictures with less light with this lens. But there is also some disadvantage. Number one, those lenses are more expensive. Sometimes even almost twice as expensive with identical focal length. And second, they are larger and heavier because the larger aperture also requires more space. So you have to think about if you really need it. I use a closed aperture of 8-13 for 99.5% of my photos, so I don't need f2.8 all the time. Only in exceptions like with night photos, I do sometimes need a bit more of open aperture. But that's why I use the 70-200mm 4.0 and the 16-35mm 4.0 and not the 2.8 most of the times when I shoot landscapes. Both are cheaper to buy, smaller and lighter than the 2.8 siblings. The diameter is also the same on both of those in the front, so I can use the identical filters for both lenses. For me, this is the optimal solution. If I take pictures at night, I use an even completely different lens with even more open aperture. Not like a 2.8, but a 1.4, like the 24mm 1.4. But again, only in these special situations when I really need it. One important point with the diameter and lenses and filters. There are some curved lenses with focal length available below 16mm on full frame, like 40mm or even 12mm on full frame. I'm not a fan of these lenses and usually find them too wide-angled. An image can quickly look cluttered. Mostly these lenses also have a curved lens in the front with a fixed lens hood. So you can only use certain XXL filter systems with very large, expensive and awkward to use and transport filters. I leave the fingers off it, but there are photographers who find this attractive. I would not recommend it for beginners, and I have not been convinced by these extreme wide-angle focal length below 16mm on full frame in all these years I've been photographing now. Last part. Image stabilizers on the lenses. They don't play a big role with modern lenses anymore, as many cameras now use the sensor to stabilize the image. If you mainly shoot with a tripod, you don't need that anyway. Also, for wide-angle lenses, it's not that important or even useful, but good to have with longer lenses like this here. In most modern Tele lenses that I know, it's included anyway. And even with very old Tele lenses, without a stabilizer on the lens, you can now stabilize it with modern cameras using the sensor stabilizer. So I would not overpay for that feature too much if your camera uses sensor stabilization anyway. What filters do you need for landscape photography? And I'm in the filter business for quite some years. Yes, I've got my own signature filters for many years. We tested a lot of things. We went all the way from screw-on filters to magnetic filters, slide-in filters. And I can tell you honestly, the only filters you need for landscape photography are 3 different filters in different strengths. Polarizer, graduated filters, ND filters. Those are the filters I use the most. Not all of the filters I use every day. None of the filters is an everyday filter, like you screw it on and use it for every photo. Every filter has its special field where you use it in. And there are some other filters out there like UV filters.
I don't use any UV filter. I never used one in my life, except of when I wanted to smash it for a video, or when I want to make something on it, or maybe for protection when I know that I photograph motocross and maybe a stone will fly on the lens, then I might use an UV filter, but usually not, because every glass you put in front of your camera is also something that might cause some issues in the photo later. Reflections, or maybe just loss of quality and so on. With those filters, of course, you have that as well, but the better the filters are, the more high quality they are. For example, made of glass instead of plastic, for example, multi-coated, nano-coated, and so on, the less you get it. It's just like in your lens, there are different pieces of glass inside, and yeah, the more expensive it is, usually you can say, the better it is. Then there are astrofilters, and astrofilters you can use for night photography, but honestly I tested it a lot and the difference is little in the photo. Maybe when you have a city glowing, maybe when you have some light pollution from some lamps, you can use it, but in the sky directly I don't see that much of a difference to get such a filter for landscape photography. Only maybe in a special situation where you have a city and you want to photograph city and stars together, or some artificial lights. Then there are some other filters like mist filters. Mist filters are okay to use, but honestly a mist filter I can do like this. I have a mist filter. Very simple, very cost effective. And I can also smear something on my lens, it's a mist filter as well. Some people love mist filters. I personally find it okay. I tested it with some landscape photos, for example with a foggy forest with some stream or something. But again, I can just blow on my lens or make my breath on my lens, and then I have as well some fog. Variable ND filters are okay for landscape photography, but I would not overuse variable ND filters because you don't get the exact number of darkness, and you need that exact number of darkness for calculation when you want to do special long exposures. Variable ND filters are okay to start with, but later I would rather switch to fixed ND filters to combine them better. We use here a variable ND filter for filming. That is very useful, but for landscape photography, I don't find it that useful. Then last but not least, there are some special filters like tinted filters in blue, yellow, magenta maybe. When you buy that on Amazon, a cheap ND filter set, there are usually some colored filters with it. Don't use it, because when you have the color in your image, you don't get it out in RAW. It's the same like with photographing in JPEG with the wrong white balance. You don't get it that easy out once you have it in. So don't use any tinted filters, only gray filters, like gray ND filters and gray gradient filters. About those specific filters, polarizers, ND filters and gradient filters, I will talk about each extra in one video, because there's a lot to tell about those filters. Yeah, those are the most common filters, and I would only use the first 3 for landscape photography. I use them quite often, and many people ask me, can you combine different filters? And the answer is, of course you can, and you have to combine them because they are different. Each filter has a different use. Maybe you want a longer shutter speed, you take the one filter. Maybe you want to get rid of reflections, you take the other filter. Maybe you want to darken the sky, you take the third filter, and then you can combine them. Of course, you don't have to, but you can. But it's important that the filters are of good quality, that they are made of glass, not of plastic, because otherwise you will have some issues with reflections and as well some issues with tinting. Because the cheaper the filters are made, then usually you get, when you put several filters over each other, some magenta cast in it or some other color cast in it. With real good filters, you don't have any cast, even if you use 3-4 filters over each other. That's it with the filters, and we see us in the next lessons when we talk more in detail about filters. In this lesson we talk about the right tripod for landscape photography. And of course there is no really right or wrong, but I can tell you my personal preferences and what I learned over the past 15 years, what to take care of and what to better avoid. First of all, the tripod always should be steady. This is the most important thing about a tripod, and this is the main reason why you use a tripod. So your tripod should be not super shaky, and the legs should be stiff, should be not too flexible. There are some tripods with very thin legs. Usually the smaller the tripods are, especially those travel tripods or those very cheap carbon fiber tripods, they have just tiny legs, almost like a fishing rod, and they are not that stable when they are all the way pulled out, so I would totally avoid them. Look for a tripod that has thick legs. Very stable legs that you cannot bend. I cannot bend those legs, so they don't swing when I pull the legs all the way out. Then important that the base is very steady, because this is the most fragile point on a tripod. A lot of people take care of nice thick legs, but then they have a very narrow plate here in the middle, and this is also then very shaky. When you have a middle column here, this thing down here, try to avoid to bring it out, because this as well is a very weak point in a tripod. Because imagine you have 3 legs, and then you have a stable position here in the middle, and then you bring the column out, and then you have 1 leg that is shaking like this in the wind. And you want it to be steady. Again, this is the reason of the tripod, because you want to maybe use a longer shutter speed, maybe have a shutter speed that you need for a longer lens, or maybe you want to film, so the tripod should always be first priority steady. I don't have here any middle column at all, because I don't need it, and also it gives you more flexibility when you want to go down all the way to the ground. Let me demonstrate. I just pull those here open, and now I can go all the way down to the ground. So I can get a very low perspective, and with a middle column it's much more difficult. You can turn them around, and sometimes that's kind of a marketing gag from manufacturers. Wow, you can turn it around to get a low perspective, but from practice, I can tell you nobody's doing it like this, because it's super uncomfortable and takes a lot of time to flip it around, bring it in, bring it down. Maybe some people do it, but I don't like it. So I like it to do it like this. Usually when I have a low perspective, I don't bring all the legs all the way out. I usually only bring maybe 1 leg out, and that's it. So steady position, most important thing. If it's carbon fiber or not carbon fiber is depending on your budget. Carbon is a bit more expensive, but nowadays they get cheaper and cheaper. This is my personal signature tripod, and because we are manufacturing tripods, I know the prices a little bit, and carbon fiber is just more complicated to fabric. It's more lightweight, but also a little bit more expensive. I personally today would always use a carbon tripod if budget is not that important, because it's just very lightweight. I cannot easily bring it up all the way here. I don't even feel it on my backpack, and this is the main reason why I made the tripod as well carbon fiber. Many years ago I said you don't need carbon fiber, it's too expensive, but really it's just a budget thing. When you can afford it, buy carbon fiber. It's maybe $100 in difference to an aluminium tripod. Aluminium prices rise as well, so maybe even just $70 in the future, but I would always choose, if you can, carbon fiber. Manufacturers build different mounts for their tripod heads, and I here have an AK Swiss mount. And AK Swiss is very common, and I would recommend you to buy a tripod with AK Swiss. There are some others like Manfrotto mount, like others. Nothing against Manfrotto, but when you want to use some accessories, then it's always, or most of the times, AK Swiss and not something special. When you have something special, you always have to buy more expensive stuff, or don't have that much of stuff to choose from. So I would choose AK Swiss. Then here the open and close mechanisms, I would choose something to turn, not something to clip, because usually with those clips you get some sand inside, some maybe small stones inside, and then it does not close and open that well. Also, it's not that comfortable to clap it open and close it with a clap. I just do it like this: turn, 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 push, closed, and then I can with one hand close it. And the same way to open it: one, and everything is open, close, close, close. Pretty fast, pretty easy. Regarding height, some people prefer a high tripod and many people criticized me for making a smaller tripod. But this is my personal signature edition tripod and I like to photograph in this height. Why? Because most of the times I look for a lower perspective, because a lower perspective looks usually more interesting because you get the foreground closer to the lens. And usually I'm somewhere around this height here when I photograph. So it's usually low, not high. But some photographers, they prefer to go a little bit higher with the perspective. They always want to photograph like this when they use a tripod. I don't. That's why I did a smaller tripod. Maybe in the future we bring a bigger version of this. Usually when I need a higher standpoint, like from maybe a rail that is there and I want to go over the rail, I just take the tripod and bring it like this over the rail. And this works perfectly fine. This is why we made here 3 big foams that we can attach it to something. Also, like with the rock here, I can easily, when I bring all the stuff in here, look how fast it gets. So when I have a rock, for example, this is also a big advantage when you don't have a middle column. I just bring it like this here on the rock, steady, and then I adjust here my ball head. And this is how the tripod is then sitting on a rock or on a rail or wherever I want to photograph. It is not important how it looks when you photograph. So one leg can be like this and the other legs like this. It's important that it's steady. Again, most important thing about a tripod. Speaking of the head, I here have a ball head, very lightweight ball head. Some other people prefer some other head. It's totally up to you. I prefer a ball head because it's very fast to use. You only have 1 screw here, 1 screw there. Open it, you can use panorama, you can tilt it in every direction you want. And there's also some screw for friction, that it's a little bit stiffer when you open the ball and have a more heavy camera on it. What I would also look for is that you can detach and attach the screws. So when you want to clean something, there's some salt maybe inside, that you can open those screws. Or when one leg gets loose from time to time, this happens with every tripod, then you can just close it here with a special tool and then it is stiff again and almost brand new. Also, the height when you pack everything was important for me. This is why we designed the tripod like this. It's not super big, it's pretty lightweight and you can still use it very steady and still it's very small when you put it on the backpack. So I try to make the perfect compromise between height when it's all the way out and all the way in, but still thick and steady. That's what I would say are the most important things about a tripod for landscape photography. Doesn't really matter from what manufacturer, if it's my tripod, if it's from another manufacturer. As long as you are happy, as long as you can work with it, as long as it's steady, totally fine. I wish you a lot of fun with your tripod in landscape photography. Let's talk about a cheap and effective helper when you photograph with a tripod in landscape photography or for whatever you will need a tripod in photography. A so-called L-mount. L-mount is that thing here attached to my camera. It looks like a cage, maybe you've heard of a cage for a camera, but it's only L shape, so on the bottom and on one side, usually the left side. And it has the Arca Swiss mount here on the bottom, so it has the shape that it fits here in my tripod on the bottom side and as well here on that portrait mode side. So I don't have here any tripod plate attached, but only this L mount. And with this here, I can now use it in landscape mode and fix it. I can also use it a little bit more on the side. If I need it, it's much more steady like this than with a normal tripod plate. And you don't have the problem that you may be recognized with your own camera or your own tripod, especially cheaper tripods with small plates, that your camera gets loose when you turn in portrait mode. Sometimes this happens, your camera, you turn it in portrait mode and then it does just swing down and then everything is loose. And this is a mess, I hate it. And with an L bracket or L mount like this, it will not happen because it's steady here on this side and on this side, and it cannot turn. When you don't have an L bracket, extra tip, always pull it over to the right side, because then your screw gets more stiff when it's turned down. This way your screw will unscrew in this direction when it's tilted in portrait mode. But better use an L bracket all the time. So now comes the great part. When I switch to portrait mode, I just slide it in because it's Arca Swiss, and now attached. And I can photograph in portrait mode. So nice. And even if I want to go to landscape and too lazy, I can do it like this. Also possible, but I prefer to shoot like this in portrait mode, and then when it goes to landscape, I just switch over. And such an L bracket is not super expensive. This here I think costs around $20 or something. This is for the A7R5, with which I mainly photograph landscapes, but I have so many different L brackets for different camera models. Usually you have to choose it with your camera body, because it must fit here on the bottom where, for example, your battery is, that you can access it. And here on this side, when you have different plugs you want to access, it should fit as well. And of course, when you have a flip screen, it should go all the way in here. And now with the A7R5, you can also flip it out and just turn it. With some other cameras, it's not that easy possible when you work with an L bracket. I would recommend it, and you can also put here some other stuff in, some other accessories if you need it. And what's neat with this one here, you even have some tool here with it, with a magnet. I just see that the magnet actually was pulled out. I think the glue is not the best. Yeah, maybe you don't have it with a more expensive L bracket, but this is just live. No, it's not live, it's a video, but yeah, I have to fix it later. But it was a nice idea to have it down here. Maybe I can glue it in. Anyway, get yourself an L bracket and have more steady shots and more fun when shooting portrait. Let's talk about image editing and editing programs. Should you edit your landscape photos? Yes, of course. When you shoot RAW, you have to actually edit your photos, because a RAW image is always, as the name says, raw. You have to tweak it, you have to season it, just like a raw piece of meat. Put some salt, put maybe some butter, put it in a pan, fry it, and then maybe delicious if you're not a vegetarian. But what I want to say, you have to edit it, because the RAW file will always look less good than the JPEG file compared to each other, because the JPEG file is already edited. And when you compare it to a smartphone, for example, and you look at your camera display and you look at your smartphone photo you maybe take next to each other, the smartphone photo will always look a little bit better because it is edited already. So don't make the mistake to think you are bad, the camera is bad, whatever is bad, your smartphone is much better. No, this is edited, this is unedited, you will need to edit it. What program you use is not really that important. It's important that you have a RAW converter. This is what you need to edit a RAW file. You cannot edit it with every program, but there are many options out there like Photoshop, Lightroom, Lumina, AC/DC, even some free options. Darktable is one. I never used it personally. I might test it in the future, but I use, for example, Photoshop, Lightroom, Lumina. Those are my go-to options, and I would say the best options at the moment available. There are some other options as well. Just Google it for yourself, try it out. Usually there's a test version. All of those programs usually do the same, because a RAW image has always the same stuff that is stored inside. You have to imagine it just like a simple text file, and in the text file there are some different informations, and the program then puts that information and you can change the informations. A RAW file is very big, usually 1 megabyte per megapixel. For example, when I have 50 or 60 megapixel, I would have a 60 megabyte file. A JPEG, for example, is then maybe only 6 megabyte in the same megapixel, because it's compressed already and you don't have that much information inside. But yeah, just get yourself a RAW converter, learn image editing. I have courses on my website about image editing in general with some programs and especially for landscape photography. And also in this XXL master course, you will get a lot of information about image editing in detail on my computer. When we talk about computers, what computer do you need for landscape photography? No specific computer, but depending on the camera you are using and depending on the file size you are using, it should be a rather fast or not so fast machine. I have very good experiences with Apple. I'm an Apple guy. I'm not a fanboy, I would say, but I like the products and I use the product for many years. I tried out Windows product from Microsoft as well, but I don't like it that much. It's just my personal taste, but I have friends that work on Windows as well, so there's nothing bad about this as well. So in general, we can say it doesn't really matter. Just get yourself a fast enough machine. Usually with MacBooks, I have the experience that every machine is great. Even a MacBook Air is good enough for image editing. Even an iPad today can do image editing. I sometimes work on an iPad to edit images in Lightroom Mobile, or now it's called Lightroom CC. But still, I would not use it as my main computer. I mainly today work with a MacBook Pro. I think it's from 2021 and it has an M1 chip inside and it has 16 gigabyte of RAM. And that's actually it. What I look for in a laptop is usually that it has enough RAM, that it has a good processor and that it has not that much storage, because in my opinion that's usually a waste of money. Better buy yourself some external storage like SSD, 2 terabyte or 1 terabyte, or even an older hard drive to store your stuff on. But I prefer SSDs with USB-C then, for example, and you can switch files very easy. You can store the files, you can plug it out, you can back up your files, and so on and so on. So don't have that much storage in your laptop, and I don't store anything, for example, on my laptop, but everything on external drives and on multiple external drives. Then the display should be good. I never had a problem with MacBooks. I had some issues with some other manufacturers. I don't want to name any specific because they evolved over the years as well, but look for a screen that when you tilt it, it does not change. So when you tilt the screen, it should not change. It should not get matte, it should not get darker or brighter, it should always stay the same. And with Retina displays, for example, or other displays, you don't usually have that issue. Look that it's bright enough, look that the colors look beautiful, and yeah, just my opinion, with MacBooks, I never had a problem. With other laptops, I had some problems, or I did not like it that much like with my MacBook, but you can call me fanboy. I would say I'm not a fanboy, I'm just a user that likes MacBooks. So I would recommend them, but you can buy whatever you want and whatever is in your budget. But I have to say honestly that MacBooks are not that expensive anymore compared to other Pro devices out there on the market. But you can make the choice you want. In general, you can say get any image editing program that can convert RAWs you feel comfortable with and you can afford, and get any machine you feel comfortable with. When you work more on a desktop, you can work with a big computer. I prefer laptops to work everywhere, and if you have big files, you need a faster machine. If you have small files, you need a smaller machine. And I wish you a lot of fun with your image editing.
You want to take photos in pouring rain or bitter cold? Easy for me, because of the best jacket system for outdoor photographers. My name is Benjamin Jaworskyj, professional photographer for over 12 years. And this is my signature edition of the Hawkland 7-in-1 Parker Pro jacket set for photographers. When I'm outdoors, I want to focus on what's truly important. I want to feel comfortable, warm, dry, and always be ready to take the photo I have in mind, no matter how bad the weather. One set, 3 jacket layers you can wear in 7 ways, made for professional use. Check it out for your adventures. Maybe you also like the photography backpack, winter gloves, or classic jacket system. At www.hawkland.us.
Hawkland, photographer's clothing.
In this video, let's talk about remote controls. When I started with landscape photography, like maybe 11 years ago or something, remote controls were really a thing. So you needed one to do bracketing for HDRs, you needed one to release your shutter, you needed one for bulb exposures, so you had to get one. They were okay expensive, sometimes you can get a cheap infrared remote control, and depending what camera you are using, you might get yourself also a remote control. But with most modern cameras, you don't actually need a remote control anymore, because what is more effective is when you want to just release the shutter and not shake on the camera, which is the main reason for remote control for most people. They don't want to press the shutter and then shake on the camera and then have a blurry image. The thing about remote controls is that you always have to have a full battery in it. Sometimes you forget it and then you want to use it, and then you cannot use it when you have it for half a year in the backpack and it's just empty. You have to find it, maybe it's somewhere else, and you have to always have it out. A better option with modern cameras is to just use the 2-second self-timer. You just go in your menu, in Drive, and then you set the 2-second self-timer. Then you press the button, it takes 2 seconds, and then the image is done. This is what I use for the last 6 years, without a remote control or anything. What I used the remote for as well was for bulb exposures, and bulb exposures mean that you not only press the button, but you press the button on the remote once and a second time when you want to finish the exposure. So you can say you press it, then the shutter opens, and you press it a second time when it should close again. So you can do exposures above 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 16 minutes I even did, and can take that long of exposure time. But now it is that a lot of cameras have it built inside already, that you can program the camera to whatever shutter speed you need. 30 seconds, no problem at all. Above 30 seconds with some camera models now possible as well. And I think in the future it will be possible with every new camera. If your camera can't do this, you need still a remote control. Best thing is that you check your camera now if you have infrared. When you have infrared, just get yourself a cheap infrared remote control. You only need the option to release the shutter, and most of the stuff the camera can do itself, like bracketing, almost every modern camera can do. If you have a really old camera and want to do bracketing, then you maybe need as well a remote for this, but most of the times it's okay to just have a simple infrared remote. That's my opinion on remote in 2023. Maybe you have a different opinion, but I would not use it anymore because I don't need it anymore. In this video we talk about the right backpack for landscape photography. And I will show you my personal backpack that I use now for many years for landscape photography. So this is the Hawkland 18-liter backpack in collaboration with Evoque Sports. And Evoque is known from mountain bike mostly, but they do very great backpacks for photography as well. And this is why Hawkland and Evoque collaborated on this specific landscape photography backpack. It's not that big, but it has plenty of storage inside. And what I take most care of is that the back piece here is very stable and very comfortable, almost gel-like. You cannot really bend it, and the lower part is exposed a little bit, that you have a better posture when you are walking. So it's very comfortable to have this backpack on your back. So this is one thing I would take care of, because usually cheaper backpacks, they don't have it, because manufacturers don't invest money then in this part here and only want to make a big backpack, let's say it like this, but it's not comfortable to wear. Then those straps here are also here on this backpack, very comfortable, very solid, and you can of course make them smaller and bigger and everything, but in general they are very good to wear. So this part here is very important, because when it's not made well, it will rip off and it will just hurt when you wear it for a longer time. So take care that this part here is also very comfortable. Then we have here those belts, and this specific belt here is made for the waist, that you can attach it to it and make it tighter, and then the weight from your back gets better distributed, better balanced over your whole body, and not only here over the straps on your shoulders. So this is very good. When you are very big in size, they might be a little too small, but with my waist here, and I'm an LXL, it is no problem, and even maybe a 2XL should be no problem to attach it. If those don't fit, you can use the other two ones here. They are not as comfortable as those, so they're very comfortable, very stretchy, good to wear with longer hikes. But if they don't work, you can use those ones. They are very, very big, should go around any waist. And I use them in a different way. And you can use it as well in a different way to flip around your backpack. Because this is a back loader, which means you access it from the back, which is good for theft protection. Also one thing I would take care of, that you don't have access from the outside, but only from the inside, because when you are in countries where it's not that safe, or when you are in areas where it's very crowded, you have the backpack on, it's good that you can only access it from the back. And when I photograph here on the beach in a landscape scenario, I don't want to put the backpack on the ground, I want to leave it on my body. And you could do it with this strap. You simply close it, then you turn around your backpack, you get rid of the shoulder straps, bring it to the front, then it's attached to your body, and you can access your backpack here over this big pocket here, this big compartment, and grab the stuff you need, and then close it and bring it back onto your back, actually. And this is very useful when you are in a sandy, muddy environment where you don't want to put your backpack down. So let's open the compartment here and see what I have here in my backpack. This is what it looks like. Here on top you can store SD cards. Usually I put here only full SD cards, then as well in a case. Here you have another compartment, and this is almost looking like the Hawkland photography jacket inside the mini photo bag. So here you have a compartment for batteries or other stuff you want to store here in this pocket that should stay a little bit protected from wetness as well. Then inside here are the main compartments for the camera. Now in my case here, what I have with me usually when I'm traveling is my filter system with ND filter, polarizer, graduated filter, and then I have here another lens, which is usually a fixed prime lens, longer lens, 55mm 1.8 in this case. Sometimes I have 75mm 1.8 or 1.4 lens depending on what I photograph, but usually it's a lightweight, longer lens with a very open aperture. Then I have my Tele lens with me. Tele lens, as mentioned, has the same diameter as my 16-35 lens, so I can use the same filter system if I want to make longer shots with a longer exposure, or if I just want to make some random tele shots, I can do it with this lens. So I don't use the 2.8 with both my wide angle and my tele. I use the 4.0 version because it's more lightweight, it's smaller, and as well I don't need the 2.8 for most of my landscape photography. That's why I chose this combination here. Then here I have a spare camera. Sometimes I have a spare camera with me, sometimes I don't. This case now is from another video course we just filmed. That's why it's here in my pocket. Then I have some cleaning stuff inside, a power bank inside, and just a headlamp inside when I want to walk somewhere where it's dark, when I want to walk over rocks, then it's great to have a headlamp with you. The backpack is even a bit bigger than it appears. I have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 filters inside. It's going all the way up to here and is a bit hidden under this space here, which is great because it does not fall out that easy when you do something like this. So let's close it again. And the difference from this backpack to the original 18-liter version from Evoc is that we closed the sides. So usually it's a sport photography backpack, that's what Evoc made it for, but we made it then for landscape photography with Hawkland, and we got rid of those side pockets here and made another compartment here for drinks, for something you want to store inside, maybe a jacket. So just a bigger pocket from the outside, but there's no more access to the inside, and it's actually more theft proof, and you can easily carry 2 2-liter bottles of water or 2 1.5-liter bottles of water here on the side, so you can store more stuff inside the backpack. You can see it here as well, so it's pretty big here on the sides to put something in. Here we have some smaller compartment. I usually use it for my sunglasses or for some cables or something. And then here on the top we have another big compartment. Right now I have here something to eat inside, but what I usually put up here is this little helper. This is also very great, and I can definitely recommend it to you. It's just a cold bag, and you can wear that cold bag on a belt. You have some strings here on the back to wear it on a belt, but you can also only hang it over your shoulders or hang it over your backpack, and that's what I usually do. So the camera usually, when I walk, is inside that little bag here, and I can then easily and fastly access it without have to turn my backpack off. And also when I travel, so when I fly or have to walk longer distances or drive in a car, I just put that pocket here like this, so upside down in this part here, and it's made that it's perfectly fitting, and then just close it like this. Bring that strap in as well. Then it's closed, and then it's perfect for hand luggage, perfect for walking around, so everything is in that bag. But when I then need it and know, okay, now the next 1 hour I will take photos as well, I will just take it out and hang it over my backpack. And while I'm talking, you see that little hack I'm using where I just hang it over the backpack, that I can also manage my weight a little bit better, and not everything is only on one shoulder or on this shoulder, but on the back actually, and I don't really feel it, but still have the big pocket here in front of me. And it's actually that big that you can put the camera, full frame camera with a 70 to 200 millimeter lens inside, with the lens hood turned reverse or turned off, and you can just store it inside. So it's big enough to even store a bigger lens. And with that lens combination, it's no problem. I sometimes even stack my filters over it, so I can access the filters and I can access the camera all from this little bag. Sometimes I even don't take the big bag, but only the smaller one. And here, this little lap here is very great. You can put your tripod in here, the legs from your tripod, and then here on the top, you can close it and attach the tripod. And you can also bring that flap in, just like this, and that's not visible. So whenever you need it, you pull it out. Then as well some rain protection and so on and so on. So for me, it's the perfect backpack, especially for landscape and travel photography, because it's not that big, not that bulky, but still has plenty of stuff to store camera equipment inside. And usually I have everything I need in this backpack, and you can get even rid of that middle part here. So there right now is a separation in between the lower compartment and the upper compartment, but you can take it out and then can make one big compartment in here to even store a super long lens like a 400 millimeter or something with a camera inside here. But then you don't have two different options here. So there's plenty of space, but again, it does not look that bulky, and it's super easy to use it in hand luggage. Yeah, this is my perfect landscape photography backpack. Maybe it's yours as well. In general, of course, it doesn't matter what brand you are using. Just take care that it has a good back part, which not many backpacks have, that it has a good shoulder strap, that you have plenty of space inside, and that it's just good, usable for you. This is the most important thing. And of course you can here store as well a little laptop or an iPad or something. This is also possible, but usually I don't carry around my iPad or my laptop when I'm photographing, only when I'm traveling. All right, that's it for the backpack. Great landscape photography backpack, and you can now in the future store your stuff and know how I store my stuff. What is the right clothing for landscape photography? And you might wonder, why do we even have to talk about it? But I find it very important, not only by coincidence, I have my own clothing collection out. No, really, I did that whole clothing collection because I needed special landscape photography clothing. Because when I'm out in the wild, I need to have several layers of clothing. This is what I would recommend you, no matter if you buy our clothing from Hawkland or if you buy other clothing. You need different layers for different scenarios. Usually when you're out photographing in the morning or in the evening, it gets pretty chilly. Even here where you're filming on a Spanish island, and at day it's super warm, the sun is shining, t-shirt weather, sun is burning, but in the evening, as you can see here, I'm wearing a fleece. It's pretty chilly in the shadow with the wind blowing from behind. So you need to have the right clothing that keeps you warm, keeps you protected. My base layer usually is, when I'm in very cold conditions, a thermal shirt, so very thin layer, and then over it, it's a fleece layer, like this one, because fleece is very breathable and as well keeps you warm. So you don't sweat that much underneath and all the moisture and all the air can go out. And as well, it's a little bit water protective. So even if there's a light drizzle, you get a light water protection from a good fleece. So in general terms, it's cozy, it's warm, and it's very comfortable and practical to use. What we then did with Hawkland is we added special photo features that I needed in the field when I was photographing. Like for example here, even in that fleece hoodie I'm wearing, this microfiber cloth attached to a string. You can clean your lens, you can clean your camera if you need it, and you can just bring it back into your sleeve pocket here. Then we have some big pockets here, and usually I store some stuff there when I'm photographing. This, for example, is a pretty cozy hoodie, but we have just a regular fleece as well with a 7-in-1 jacket, or you can buy it as well single. We have special photography features inside as well for storage. That means you have like a mini photo bag with SD compartments, battery compartments and bigger pockets, and as well here on the side are some pockets with some zips. So you need enough pockets to store stuff. In my case, usually batteries, because batteries, when I'm in colder conditions, they discharge very fast and then they don't have that much energy left. Especially with drone batteries, it's a huge issue when you don't store it right. I personally store it here in the inside mini photo bag to keep it with my body heat warmed up all the time. Sometimes you cannot fly, sometimes you have only 50% left of energy. Also with GoPros, when we are filming in Norway, we had some issues when it was not close to the body, even in maybe 7 degrees Celsius outside. So always keep batteries very warm and cozy, that they don't get empty that fast. Then I would recommend you a second layer. It's a more puffy layer that can also have a little bit air inside. This is why it's puffy, to keep you more warm, more insulated. And you can take that layer off when it's too warm, or you can bring it on when it gets cold and you stand around a lot, because in landscape photography, usually, let's say northern lights, or let's say you wait for something special like a sunset, sunrise, whatever, you stand around. You walk first a lot, you wander around, and then you stand a lot. So an insulated jacket, a puffy jacket to put over the fleece jacket, and then you are pretty warm. But then comes the next element. This is usually rain and wind, or snow maybe even, but snow is not that difficult, but rain and wind is. So you need a rain and wind protection as your last layer. In Germany we say it's an onion principle, because you have different layers like an onion, a base layer, a middle layer, an insulated layer, and an outer layer or an outer shell, which is usually the rain and wind protection. So get yourself a wind protection on the outside, a rain protection on the outside. There are tons of options out there, no matter if from Hawkland Photographers Clothing or from other outdoor brands, just regular outdoor brands. The special thing about Hawkland Photographers Clothing is that we have like the microfiber cloth in all 3 layers, also in the rain jacket, also in the insulated jacket, in the fleece layer, and the mini photo bag is also there, and everything fits over each other, and you can even zip it into each other to make it one jacket. So you have 7 different ways to wear when you buy one set, and therefore you are prepared for every weather situation. Take care depending on what you need for your photography. If you are just a regular photographer, I would say, a regular outdoor photographer, you don't need that much of rain protection. But when you are out in the field a lot in a more professional way, like I also do. We have a pro version out there that has taped seams, that has membrane fabric, that is more robust and more scratch proof, just warmer and more waterproof than our regular base model, you can say, our classic model, depending on your needs. And usually this is also why some outdoor brands are more expensive than other outdoor brands, because they just use other fabric, and some fabric is more expensive, and also the way it is stitched together is more expensive when you have to tape every seam. So yeah, this is what I would recommend for outdoor photography. Check out our website at hawkland.us or hawkland.de, depending where you're from. Also, you should find us on Amazon and at other shops. And when you don't like us, just buy anything else. Important is that you use a multi-layer system, an onion system, you can say, to keep you warm at any weather, at any time. And also there are special photography gloves that are quite useful when you photograph in very cold conditions, because they keep your fingers warm, but still you can use your camera, you can use touch and so on. And we also have it at Hawkland. But enough of the commercial for now. Yeah, but we made this brand for exactly that use, for landscape photographers, that they have good clothing, or actually for every outdoor photographer. All right, so see you in the next video.
The most important thing for great landscape photos is neither the camera nor the lens, but the light. The sun is our natural light source, and I, as a photographer, unlike with this flashlight here, I can't change the direction or the strength of the sun. Or can I? Yes, I can decide when to photograph, at what time of day, and also in what season. Both have an influence on the photo. A photo always consists of three elements: the subject, the light, and the season. As a photographer, I then take my camera with my focal length I choose and capture this specific moment I chose. It is about moments in time that fit to my subject. A regular motif that can be found anywhere, just some trees. But add some light, add some fog, boom. Good light is of course a matter of taste. But if you ask me, my favorite light is the morning and the evening light. Mostly after sunset and before sunrise. Then usually the sky colors and you have the indirect sunlight on the landscape. Beautifully diffused soft shadows and mostly colorful. But of course it depends on the motive and taste. Some like it more mystical, like with mountains or a castle. There you want the foggy, moody shots. On the other hand, that mood and light does not look too nice on a tropical island. There you rather seek for the blue sky and bright colors. So you have two options. Either you plan exactly the image you want to take, like the motive is a castle, and I want to photograph it in autumn, with mystical clouds or even some fog. Then I have to wait for this exact moment and observe the weather and also bring in some time to get that specific shot I seek for. Neuschwanstein Castle, for example, I wanted to photograph in the snow, as it is a white castle and I thought it looked beautiful. I had to wait until everything fits. In summer it's not possible, so I waited until winter. Then the weather needed to be right. I waited for one sunny day with snow and went up there before sunrise to get the soft, colorful light in the morning. And then I took a great photo. But it was a lot of planning ahead and a lot of waiting. Option 2, if you don't have that much of time or do not want to spend it, is to take what you get and make the best out of it. If I have a motive and the light does not fit, for example, a waterfall, let's say, I usually want to take a photo in rather soft light and maybe even a cloudy sky. But maybe I have on that day a blue sky with bright sunlight and I only have time now because I'm traveling, maybe. Then I try to make the best out of that situation. It's a creative process. Both options are cool and have their own challenges. One is like hunting for the right moment and usually needs a lot of planning, preparing and patience, just like hunting. But the second one can be also very creative in a different way and can also be interesting. Landscape photography apps and tools. As we discussed in the lesson before, we can plan our photos as best as we can prior to taking the photo. In this lesson, I want to give you a few tools that I use to do this. Number 1, find motives and locations. Again and again, I've received messages from photographers who are looking for motives and did not know what exactly they should photograph, or how they can find cool photo motives. Therefore, I have a few tips for you on how I search my spots. First of all, there are certain categories in landscape photography that you can specifically look for. These include mountain formations that look interesting, maybe beaches with rocks, lakes, jetties, special trees, special buildings, bridges, streams, and waterfalls. If I know what I'm looking for, then I find motives much faster because the brain then pays heavy attention to this. You then can use Google Maps or Google Earth if you are in areas where you're not that familiar with and can do a lot of research from home already. Tourism websites of specific regions, Instagram, Facebook, or photo apps can sometimes also contain useful information. We have started a very extensive research project for Germany, Austria, and Switzerland in 2020 with a local photo community, in which suggestions could be sent to us for great photo motives all over the countries. In addition, we ourselves have then researched very intensively and then curated over 1,000 of the best photo motives in all 16 German national states and Austria and Switzerland. Packed into 5 books, it looks like this, and you can simply browse through the books and find the coolest photo spots without much research. Sample photos, trivia, photo tips, and QR codes to scan and navigate via Google Maps to the exact locations. To visit and photograph all the spots in the books, it would take years. So many photo motives. And not only because I initiated that whole project, I can absolutely recommend these books for planning photos. Available in German at our German website lernvonben.de and on Amazon, and maybe even available when this video comes out in English in the future. And maybe also for other country regions. I don't know when those videos exactly will come out. Sometimes it also helps to go to a specific area like the Alps region, the Atlantic coast, Black Forest in Germany, or something else, where you just roam around and look what you find interesting. The photography travel guides can be a first helper maybe and lead you to a hotspot or to a region, and from there you then look for yourself what you find interesting and what inspires you. Something like the photography travel guides can then be a first guide or first helper to lead you to the hotspots or regions, and from there you take a look for yourself and find what you find interesting and what inspires you. Planning the light is pretty easy with a little experience. You just look at the time when it's sunrise, at the place where you want to shoot, on the date you want to shoot. Every day this time is different. Only a few hundred kilometers distance from east to west, this time can change noticeably. I usually just use Google search for this. Simply enter a date and the place where you want to photograph, and then the keyword sunrise or also sunset. Then I subtract 1 hour from the sunrise time. This is the time when I want to be at the spot with my camera. Now I have enough time to look around on site and take the full light spectrum in the morning. In the evening I do the same. 1 hour before sunset, I'm at the location. If I have hiking distances or travel time, I must calculate these on top, of course. If I have a motive in mind, then I also plan in advance whether the location is better in the evening or in the morning, or maybe even with both. In our photo guides, there are already hints. But if you have no guide book or have never visited the location before, I can simply check the directions. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Just look on a map, like with Google Maps, where the location is you want to shoot and what is the viewing direction. Is it east or west? And then you know what time to go there. Further possibilities for planning you have with apps like PhotoPills or Sun Surveyor. Here you can enter a location and display the Sun, Moon and Milky Way courses. This even works with AR, means you stand at a place and hold the smartphone over your head in the sky, and it shows you over the smartphone display the course of the Sun or the Moon or the Milky Way if you want to take pictures at night. Amazing. Also many additional informations like the timings of sunrise, sunset, blue hour calculations and so on and so on. So those apps are really worth the bucks. I think $10 or something costs Photopills or Sun Surveyor. The last point is the weather. Depending on the region, classic weather apps work better or worse. Predictions for several days are usually not very reliable, and I would always pay attention to weather forecasts a maximum 24 hours before I want to shoot. There are special regional weather websites, depending where you live or where you want to take photos at, that you can look at that show the rain radar, snow radar and even fog radar, so you can plan your fog photos with a website in advance. Just Google it. Again, look at it a maximum 24 hours before you want to shoot. Everything else is not really meaningful, especially in an area where are mountains or maybe close to the sea. The weather can be completely different there within 30 minutes. For special photos like maybe the Milky Way or northern lights in the sky should be of course clear. If rain or snow is predicted, I usually don't go out at those days. But if I want to photograph at the sea and want maybe some colors in the sky, then I go out even if a little rain is predicted. At that time I want to photograph. Because usually you have the best dramatic light with clouds and the sun in a mix. So that's what I look for. In general, you should not let the weather influence you too much, unless you have very specific ideas. I've often been positively surprised by the weather forecast, and it was much better than predicted. Or an unexpected rain has even revealed motifs that I otherwise would not have photographed. Only when it's raining or snowing heavy, I don't take pictures. Besides that, there is no weather in which I don't take photos. The weather is closely related to the seasons. For example, in summer, you can hope for clear skies, rather than in autumn or winter when it often rains. A mystical atmosphere with fog is rare in summer, but more regular in autumn or winter. Snow in summer is also rather uncommon, although this might be different at some day with climate change. In addition, there are season-specific things to photograph, such as the blooming of flowers in spring, or coloring of the leaves in autumn, cornfields in summer, or ice and snow in winter. You can make the same subject look completely different by taking 4 photos over the course of a year, each at a different season. Let's say a tree on a field in 4 seasons. And if you photograph the same subject again in different weather, the same spot will also look completely different in each season. So you can take at least 8 different photos over the course of 1 year from one single motif. Spring has a lot to offer. Beside the cliché of flowers that start to bloom, everything slowly turns green. And even the phase before everything turns green can be very interesting. For example, when I was in Scotland. In summer, everything is typically lush and green. In early spring, the colors look completely different. Orange, yellow and red dominate the landscape. If you are near mountains, then in spring the ice and snow melts and the streams and waterfalls carry a lot of water. There are maybe even waterfalls visible that carry little or no water for the rest of the year. For waterfall fetishists like me, this is a great time of year. Most spots are also not that crowded with tourists, usually that begins around Easter. That way, many popular places you have all to yourself in spring. Summer is challenging and yet, or perhaps because of it, exciting. The days are very long and the sun during the day is very high. Around noon, it's not that much fun to photograph and you can use the time better to just relax. In the morning and evening, you have the chance to see the big red ball in the sky. But long days mean that you either have to get up very early or go to bed very late, which means that at sunset, popular spots are often pretty crowded. It also doesn't get that dark at night the further you go north or south. But in summer, you have the great opportunity to photograph stars and especially the Milky Way. It's warm at night and the big part of the Milky Way is visible if you are far enough away from the light of cities. Also, storms occur frequently in summer and can be spectacular to observe and photograph. Seasonal plants such as sunflowers, lupines, fireweeds or the lavender fields offer great opportunities to get out and take photos. Autumn is one of my favorite seasons, and not just because I was born in October. When I think of autumn, I see forests full of fog and beautiful colored leaves. It's often said that autumn is very rainy, but that's usually more true of winter where I live. I've had great sunny days in autumn, and even when it rains, the forests have their own special charm. In addition, the sky often turns in beautiful colors after rain. You don't have to get up that early as in summer for sunrise, and the popular spots get emptier again. If you are lucky, you can hear deer roaring in the early morning hours as they mate, or you can see cranes resting in the fields as they migrate. Every tree species has a different color in autumn, from light faded green to yellow, orange or blood red leaves. Beech forests are especially worth seeing, but also avenues with maple trees or houses with wild vine are very worth photographing. The winter is, as I find, often underestimated. The best thing about winter is that you have almost the whole day low and yellow sunlight. The further north or south you go on the Earth, you won't find much light at all. Natural phenomena like the aurora borealis attract thousands to Scandinavia, Iceland, Alaska or Canada in the north. If you want to experience this spectacle, you should definitely plan more than 3 days, because besides a strong activity, you also need clear weather, which is not always the case in winter. I photograph northern lights mostly between February and March, or even in early September to October in the northern hemisphere. The days are a little longer then, and the temperature are more pleasant. Of course, I like to shoot in winter wonderlands, although in many cities there is not much snow depending where you live anymore. In Germany, I need to go further north or in mountain regions that are a bit higher to really get white snow and maybe frozen waterfalls and not just grey, slushy piles on the side of the road. Rainy, cold days are no fun for me either, so I often use that time of year with that weather to edit pictures or do office work. Extra tip: for a longer battery runtime in winter, always put your full batteries in your inside pockets near your body or in another warm place. That will help a lot.
This is a great jacket system for outdoor photography. I'm Albert Ross, professional landscape photographer, and this is my Hawkland Parker Pro jacket. This red color is my personal signature edition. It has multiple layers, not just this layer. It has a fleece layer, a mid layer and this outer layer. It's very waterproof, it's windproof and it's suitable for any kind of weather conditions. Anyone can wear it, but it's a jacket system aimed at photographers, meaning it has some very nice features like this little pocket with my lens cloth attached here. I can quickly take it out for my glasses or my lens or my filters. Then it has really big pockets here for accessories, and it has a lot of nice pockets inside for batteries, smartphone, SD cards. It's very convenient for me as a photographer to use, not only because of the weather, but also because of all these nice features.
Now on sale, discontinued and off-season items up to 60% off at www.hawkland.us.
Hawkland, photographer's clothing.
In landscape photography, just like in all other genres of photography, image composition plays an important role. In this lesson, I'll explain what I look for when taking photos and how you can take better photos too. The most important composition tool for me is the grid. I always use the grid whether on my smartphone or on the real camera. Depending on the manufacturer, there are different ways to set it in the menu. The most common grid, and the one I always use, is the 3x3 grid. It consists of 3x3 squares, so 9 in total, and there are also 2 lines, 2 vertical and 2 horizontal lines. And these divide the image into sections or thirds, which is why it's also called the rule of thirds. The horizontal lines, for example, now divide my image into 1, 2, 3 thirds. The lines also help me to straighten my horizon if I don't have a water level in the camera or on my tripod. And at the same time, divide my image. For example, into 1/3 of sky and 2/3 of foreground, or the other way around, 2/3 of sky and 1/3 of foreground. How I decide depends on the subject. If the sky is exciting, then I take more of the sky. But if the foreground is important, then I of course use more of the foreground in the image. I can also use the lines to position the horizon edge in between, then the horizon is exactly in the middle between the lines. But remember, these are guiding or helping lines to help you with your own taste, your own composition. There is no right and no wrong, only your taste. Now we not only have the 2 horizontal lines, but also the 2 vertical lines that we can use to further arrange the picture. You can use them to define the exact center of the image. This means that your subject or something interesting in the picture is located between those lines in the middle, or you can make sure that the lines run right through your eye catcher. If you have, for example, a stone or something else in the foreground, you can combine the horizontal and the vertical lines. The lines also help you not to place things too far to the edge. You may want or need to crop the image afterwards, and then it often happens that parts of the motif are cut off if they are too far or too close to the edge. So the lines are also a kind of safe space for you. I'm now on my computer and have different images ready for you to demonstrate you the grid. This image, for example, I shot at Tele in Scotland, and I will quickly change the color for you that you can see it better. And when you imagine now the grid here in this landscape, and you can really easy make it via the cropping tool here, just go on the cropping tool and then you can actually set whatever rule you want to have. In my case now, the rule of thirds, as mentioned in this video. And now I just drag it over the image, crop it, let it loose, and now you can see the 3x3 grid. And what I always take care of is that I have, for example, in this image here, the horizon pretty close to the upper horizontal line, and on the lower part, on the horizontal line, is something interesting, the rock here in this image. And on the crossing point here in the left corner is, for example, that rock formation in the sea. And I can even crop it a little better from a composition point, something like this. Now you can see it's pretty much now accurate on that crossing point here, and down at the bottom is that rock, also pretty accurate, and up here on the horizontal line now is exactly the horizon of the world, you can actually say. What would be, of course, a little bit better if the sunrise actually would be at a crossing point here. Now I can draw it something like this. Something like this would be the second line. So when you have some practice, you can actually just imagine where the crossing points and where the lines are. So the sunset around here would be pretty perfect. Then we would have 1, 2, and 3 here in the image. But I have, of course, other images where I use it, and it's not coincidence. Here, for example, in this image, if we imagine now those lines, we have one line here, we have one line there, we have one line not exactly here, but as you can see, the sky is not that interesting here, so I even gave the sky less space. So it's not a rule, the rule of thirds, you always have to stick on exactly to place the horizon at the first horizontal line. You can make it however your taste is. And in this case, for example, I have it here, but still, the sun is almost at the crossing point up here. And then this here is diagonal through the image. And one crossing point is here, if we imagine now the second line down here, and it goes diagonal from the right bottom corner up to the left upper corner. And this is what I usually call filling the image. And when you now imagine a middle ground, we also have a middle ground right here in the middle is like a middle horizontal line where the formation, where the mountain goes a bit in the valley. So all of this is part of the composition. I take a lot of effort into making the image look like it is. When you just look at the image without knowing that, you might just say it's a beautiful image, but you don't know why. And somehow inside of you, unconsciously, you think it's a good composition, but now you know why actually it's a good composition. And as you see, there's nothing close to the edge. So everything is kind of in the middle like, but not exactly in the middle. And everything is, just well balanced in this image. And again, it's not coincidence. It's almost with every image I took or take. For example, this image, here is one line, here is the second line, then we have one line going here, and we have one line going here. And as you can see, the lines go through the waterfall. They are somehow in the area around that rock here. Then we don't have the exact horizon. The horizon is more like in the middle ground here. This would be the exact horizon, so in between the horizontal lines. Then we have the peak here, the beautiful peak of that mountain, which is at that crossing point. And then we have some other stuff going on here at this crossing point. So all in all, something is happening here, something is happening there, the two waterfalls, something is happening here, and something is happening on the other side. And again, nothing close to the edges so that you get soaked into the image. And then on top to the composition, I used a longer exposure, a polarizer, a graduated and defilter here for the top. And with the longer exposure, for example, we have the clouds moving here. We have the nice saturated water with the polarizer and the smooth water through the ND filter. And the dark sky, of course, with the graduated filter. So everything comes together, as you can see here. But you can not only use it for landscape photos, you can also use it for other areas of photography, like for other genres, underwater photography. Who would think about a grid, a 3x3 rule with underwater photography? But with this shot here I took in Egypt, I used the same principle. As you see, here is one line. It's exactly where the coral reef is. So left vertical line is the reef. On the right vertical line is the other column in the water with the reef and some of that lionfish as well. The big lionfish on the left side is exactly on that line. And if we make another line here, then the face or the mouth of that lionfish is exactly at the crossing point. And this is not a coincidence. This is how I composite the image underwater actually. And when we have now the second vertical line, it's somewhere around here, nothing interesting happening, but we have kind of a golden spiral going all through the image here with that school of fishes the lionfish are actually feeding on. So it's a very nice, in my opinion, very nice composition here. And this is why I took that image and why I chose this image to show it to you. Of course, this is not the only image I took. I took like maybe 50 images from that situation. But this is the image I chose afterwards where the composition was just perfect and where that school of fishes was just perfect aligned in that golden spiral leading through the mouth actually of the lionfish. And this is why I like this image so much. So you can see not only for landscape photography but for all genres of photography, you can use that grid lines and you can play with them and make your image more attractive and more interesting. This method of composition takes time and you have to really train your eye. That's why I often use a tripod to really set up my frame, my image with pinpoint accuracy. The exciting thing is that if you go to a museum and look at old landscape paintings by favorite artists, the pictures are often constructed according to a similar principle, no matter what period. And Even when I paint myself, I usually draw a grid line under the picture to orientate myself where I am in the image and what the proportions should be, because especially with large paintings, you're usually sitting or standing close to it while painting, but then have to look at it from the distance as a whole. This is actually an age-old technique that, thanks to modern digital cameras, you can simply overlay while you take the image. The famous golden ratio or golden spiral works in a very similar way via the crossing points. And you can use them in the same way a hunter maybe uses the crosshair on a rifle to aim at the target. But you, of course, aim at your photography target.
In this lesson we talk about visualization and why it's super important for landscape photography, or at least I use it almost always to get the shots I want and deserve. And visualization actually means nothing else than to think about a photo before you shoot it, to just try to plan everything as good as possible, and then the rest is total luck. But the more you plan and the better you are prepared, the higher your chances are that you have good luck. And I personally find it very difficult to not plan the shot. Usually I don't wander around and just take any shot. I always plan my shots, and even though sometimes it looks so easy, it's not that easy. It's a lot of preparation actually. It's just like with movies, like with Hollywood movies or advertisement movies or whatever movies, even YouTube videos. Everything needs to be prepared. You have to think about, where do you shoot it? When do you shoot it? At what time? How do you shoot it? With maybe what lens, what camera? Do you need extra batteries? What other settings you take? And you can do everything in advance. So let me give you some examples of photos I took, different scenarios, and I explain you what I planned and how it turned out. So the first photo I want to show you is a Northern Lights shot I took some years ago. I can't remember actually, maybe it was 4 years ago or something. And I not only wanted to take a normal Northern Lights shot, but I wanted to combine it with a reflection, I wanted to combine it with a person in the frame, I wanted to combine it with a flashlight and some mountains in the back. And this is the shot I visualized, I imagined beforehand, and then went out on the exact time where the circumstances were right. Let me explain. Northern Lights you cannot shoot all year long. You can mainly shoot it in winter, and then at specific months it is better to photograph them because weather usually is better in this time. So in summer you cannot photograph Northern Lights because it is too bright in the northern hemisphere. The further north you go in summer, the less night you will have, until there's no more light but only sun all day long. And the opposite is in winter. In winter you have days where there's no sun or almost no sun over the horizon, and there it's much darker and much better to photograph Northern Lights because you don't see them in summer because it's too bright. And in winter you can see them, but the weather has to be right as well. So a cloudy sky, you don't see Northern Lights. So you need a clear sky. Some areas are better with just weather and some places are worse. Some places are a little bit warmer, more comfortable to photograph. Other places are colder, maybe not that comfortable to photograph. So you can plan all of this with some research in advance and then go there when the specific time is. For example, this shot I took around February or March in winter. And the weather usually during that time is much more stable, not that much snow, still snow, but not that much like in the other month. It is still a little more light at day, so you have maybe 6, 7, 8 hours of daylight. And at night you have a high possibility to capture Northern Lights. But even if the weather is good, you still need activity from the Northern Lights. So you cannot be sure that every day the activity is good, strong, or there at all. So some nights there is a clear sky, but no Northern Lights. So I have to set myself like a time frame, maybe 5 days, 7 days, to get the shot that I want. And as I photographed a lot of Northern Lights already during that time, I wanted to make a specific shot with a mountain in the background, so I had to look for some place where I have a mountain in the background. Then I wanted some reflection of the Northern Lights, so not only pure shot of the sky and some mountain, but as well some foreground with some reflections. But where do you get reflections in wintertime? Because all lakes are frozen, snow on top. The sea may be, but the sea is rough and it's usually very windy up there in the north. You don't see that in photos, but in reality it can be super windy. So the sea is rough and you don't have much reflection usually there. Maybe a small puddle would work, so I have to look for maybe a small puddle. But what I looked for is just a beach where it's low tide. Because when it's low tide or the water is away and coming up or going down, doesn't really matter, then usually I have sand with just a little bit of water on top. Just a little bit, enough to have a reflection. And then maybe a wave is coming, bring in new water, and then chuck, the wave goes and I have a beautiful new reflection. So I looked for a specific beach at low tide with a mountain in the background, so this was the spot. So all I had to do now is to wait until the weather was right, until the activity was strong enough, and then I went to that beach and then I captured that photo. But not only with a reflection, I wanted a person, so we had to be several persons to have one person standing in the frame, and the person needed a flashlight, a little torch, a headlamp to shine in the lens of my camera to make it actually visible in the image. And this was then the photo that I captured, and this was exactly the photo that I imagined. It was no coincidence. It was luck, of course, because we needed the right weather. I cannot really control that, but I can plan and go out at a specific time to a specific place, set specific settings and frame everything, make the composition like I needed to get the shot I want. Another example, a night photography shot, but now the opposite way, a Milky Way shot. And I took this shot in Spain. In a very remote area in Spain where there's not much villages or civilization. There are usually just some small fincas and some random fields of almond trees and some other maybe olive trees and so on. So it's a very dark area. How did I choose, or why did I choose this area? Because for a Milky Way shot, I need a very dark place. It's not enough to just go outside a city. It has to be a very, very dark place. So I looked up a dark sky map and I looked up a specific region in Spain where I saw on the dark sky map, oh, it's almost black there. So there's almost no light pollution. It's like in the desert in Africa. So I go to that specific area and then I roam around, look around during daylight and look for places, spots, where I can photograph then at night. Because to find a spot at night is very difficult, but find a spot at day is very easy. Then I just mark the spot and remember the spot. And this is a great tip that you can use for your photography as well. Scout when the light is bad, look for good locations and perspectives when the light is bad, and then take the shot when the light is good, very fast. So I went to that specific area in a specific time of the year. With Milky Way, it's the opposite way than with Northern Lights. Usually in summer, you can take the best Milky Way shots around May, June, July, August. This is a very good time because then the galactic center, it's like the core of the Milky Way you usually see in the nice epic Milky Way shots. It's the most beautiful part to photograph. It looks the most impressive. It's very nice structured, great colors, very white, and this part is not always visible. It's only visible in one direction, first of all, so in the opposite way it's not visible, and it's only up over the horizon at a specific time of year and not constantly over the whole night, but at specific times. You can calculate and look all of this up in the internet or with specific apps like I, for example, use Photo Pills. You can calculate and look up all of this. So I planned exactly the time when the Milky Way center is up at a specific place, somewhere in the middle of nowhere in Spain, and then with a certain weather, because the sky needs to be clear to see the Milky Way, no clouds, no nothing. But it was summer in Spain, it was hot anyway, and there were no clouds around, so great conditions. But then again, the moon phase is important for Milky Way shots, so you cannot shoot it at every moon phase because you need to have no moon at all, just pure darkness. So I had to calculate and look up for a specific date where no moon is up. You can do this either way, when the moon is not rised, or when it's already down, or when it's not coming at all and it's new moon. Then you could also take very nice shots. So you have a specific timing for this photograph. So all of this was in place. I did all the calculation. I went there at a specific time, had 3 days of time to capture the shots I wanted to. It had to be one specific place, one specific time, one specific weather. And then I went there at night. I found a nice spot at day. I went there at night, and then it was so easy. I just took the shot. I just took the shot because everything was planned. And after I took the shot, I wanted to just a nice Milky Way shot. That was my main goal, with some foreground, some almond trees. I then got creative. I then started to, I add a person, I photograph out of my tent, I maybe take the car in the frame, I choose a different aperture to test it, choose different ISO levels, choose maybe a whole different lens, choose maybe a different camera just to do tests. And this is the great thing, when you planned everything, when you made everything possible and you have a very high chance of succeeding, then you can get really creative on site in that frame. So I personally find it the easiest way to get super creative the more limitations you have. It might sound the total opposite, but this is what I experienced in the past 14, 15 years I'm photographing now. And not only in photography, but also in all other genres I do, like writing, like music, like everything. The more limits you have, the more you can get creative in this limitation you gave. The last photo I want to show you is captured in Brittany, France. And this shot I also scouted at day. So I made myself some markers on Google Maps where I wanted to go. During that time I lived in France, so I just made up some points in the region I just wanted to visit and check out if there's anything great to photograph. So I did not know that exact spot, but just the area. I went there, I found the house, I thought that's a great spot to take a photo. Let me check, it's a nice sunset spot, so I have to go there by sunset and not by sunrise, because every spot looks different in different light. Some spots are better at sunrise, some spots are better at sunset, some are good in both lights, some are good in only maybe daylight, some are good for Milky Way, and so on and so on. So each spot is different, but this spot was great for sunset. So I decided, okay, I go back there at sunset. I already found myself a position with some foreground, some fern, and then that little house on the cliff. Very beautiful shot. So I planned, I looked at the weather forecast, I found a day where I thought, it's nice, it was the sun in the weather forecast, so I thought sun, great, sunset spot. So I went there, I set up my camera, I waited for the sunset to come. Usually I stand around there for 1 hour then and wait with the light changing to capture the right moment. But then I realized it's super boring, because the sun was so boring. It was just going down, and this for me usually is the most boring situation in landscape photography. Only a sun going down, shining in the camera. You can maybe work with a star, with a sun star, but I find it boring. I realized I have to go there again at sunset, but with different weather conditions. I need more clouds. So I waited for the right day, and it was not that easy, because we had like a period of pure sunshine, which was great for tanning, great for being outside on the beach, but not so great for the kind of photography that I like. Then someday the day came where the weather forecast said rain, sun, cloudy, nice. This is the weather I want. So changing weather conditions, sun and clouds in a mix, this is usually a good combination. So I went again, 1 hour drive to that spot. I knew exactly where I wanted to go. I put my camera, I set the frame, exact same framing. Everything was the same like on the other day, but now I saw, nice. The clouds are already coloring, the sun is going down, and after sunset usually is the moment where I capture my photos. So not really with the sun setting, but after the sun went down, because then the clouds get illuminated from the bottom, so it's more indirect light, not direct light in the camera. I put in my graduated filter. The clouds were super colorful, it looked almost like a painting, and this was the shot I wanted to have. So I visualized that spot, and then still you can make some adjustments and realize, I wanted more in this or that way. But again, I visualized how I wanted it to be, and I realized I don't want it like this. This is also part of visualization, to make maybe mistakes or just go in one direction, then see I need to correct it, I need to go to the other. But I want to capture the photo in that specific way I imagine. And this is what I wanted to teach you with this lesson. So try to think of everything you can beforehand. Try to plan the location, the light, the season, the lens you're using. Do you use filters, no filters? Whatever you can do in advance, try to do it, then get to the location and then get creative. This is what I find most interesting about landscape photography. So try it out for yourself, visualize your shot, and I wish you great photos. In this lesson we talk about the right camera settings for landscape photography. And of course there are no general camera settings you can use for every photo, but there are some things that are quite common, and there's a certain way where I choose the camera settings, and maybe you can use that for your photography as well. So the first thing, usually I photograph in manual mode. I don't use any semi-automatic mode or anything because I want full control of everything. Then when I'm in manual mode, I usually start, of course, with ISO at the lowest point, usually ISO 100. Why the lowest point? Because then it gives me flexibility whenever I need it as kind of boost. I can bring it a little bit up, but I start at 100 because whenever I can, I use 100 to get the lowest amount of noise. Next thing I set is the aperture. And usually the aperture is somewhere in the middle range. It's not completely opened, it's not completely closed. This gives you the advantage of flexibility that you can open it when you need it to get more light on the sensor, and when you need it you can also close it a little bit more when you want less light on the camera sensor. And also in general you have in the middle range of your aperture range the best image quality. So you don't have much of aberrations, you don't have much of maybe blurriness in the corners, of maybe some vignetting or something that you might have with an open aperture. And as well you have a lot of sharpness in the image, so from the foreground to the back. It's not the highest amount you can achieve, but it's a good amount to get started with. So usually I start somewhere around 8, 9, 10 in aperture. f8, f9, f10, sometimes f11 even. But this gives me the most flexibility. The last thing I then set is the shutter speed. And even though the shutter speed sometimes is very important, I usually set it last because I can compensate the shutter speed with the use of ND filters. Therefore, I prefer to set first priority to aperture, ISO, and last to shutter speed, because usually I photograph with a tripod and the shutter speed for this is never really important in terms of I shake my camera because I use the tripod. So it's only important when I want to achieve certain effects. But the effects I can then create over, for example, ND filters, and then can make my exposure time, the shutter time, longer. So this is the order I usually make my camera settings, and it's very easy because sometimes people are confused when they use manual mode. They don't know what to set first. Start with ISO, then do aperture, then last shutter speed, and then it's very simple to set everything because you only have to think about the shutter speed and think about it in terms of bright and dark. You want it a bit darker, you make the shutter a little bit faster, and you want it a little bit lighter, then you make the shutter a little bit longer. So, and then I have the idea, okay, maybe I need half a second shutter speed because I want some blur of waves maybe. Okay, I want 15 seconds of shutter speed because I want the water to smoothen a lot. Then I set that specific shutter speed, and then with the help of ND filters, and then I change maybe aperture as well and close it a little bit more to achieve more darkness in the image, or maybe even open it a little bit more to get it a bit brighter. But when then I cannot open it anymore because I'm maybe at 5.6 or something and I don't want that aperture because then I might get some blur in the foreground, then I start increase the ISO. So then I go with the shutter speed, then I try to adjust it with the aperture, and when there's a limit in aperture, then I go over to the ISO as a boost. This is usually my workflow. Then last thing is the focus. Focus I usually set on infinity. Infinity is very easy. I have a whole lesson here in this course how I focus and why I use mostly infinity. This is of course only with wide angle lenses. When you use other lenses it might not work that well, like when you use a Tele lens, 200mm, 100mm, something like this, then it might be a little bit different, even though most of the times it should be infinity as well. But I speak now mainly with wide angle lenses, and also when I use my lens I usually usually don't zoom that much. I only zoom when I have to, when I can't get any closer. If I can get any closer, I will usually not zoom, but really go closer with my tripod, and maybe only use the zoom if I can't go closer, or if I want to crop in a little bit more, that I don't want that much of foreground, don't want maybe that much of middle ground or something, then I try to crop it via my zoom, or I crop it later in post. That would also be possible if you only have one fixed focal length. But usually my focus is set on infinity, and in 99% of times this works totally fine. And if it does not work, check out the lesson where I talk about focus. Then, of course, camera settings RAW. I usually only photograph RAW, not RAW and JPEG, because I don't need the JPEGs. I will convert them later from a RAW file to a JPEG anyway. And white balance is usually set on daylight or on shadow or at auto. Doesn't really matter that much with a RAW file, but sometimes I set it on purpose on shadow because I want it a bit more yellow, a bit more warm, maybe with a sunset, maybe with autumn colors. Just when I want it a bit more yellow already on the display to get a certain feeling about the look, then I will set it, but usually daylight is totally fine, or just auto with RAW. Then my drive mode is set to 2 seconds of self timer. When I use a tripod, I then just press it, 1, 2, then it takes the image. My sensor stabilization is always turned on. I did some tests where I turned it off on a tripod because I thought, well, in older times it was common that you set your stabilization on the lens off when you use the tripod. But as this stabilization on the sensor works different, it is a different kind of stabilization, it has to be turned on. So when I turned it off, the image got blurry actually, even though it was photographed from a tripod, because the sensor then was just swinging and wobbling around. And when I turned it back on, it works totally fine. So always try to turn the sensor stabilization on when you have a sensor stabilization, when you use a tripod, even though it might not make that much sense at first sight, but I can tell you from my experience it makes sense and it will make a difference in the image. When you have an image stabilization only in the lens, not in your camera body, then try to turn it on, take a test photo with a longer exposure, try to turn it off, take a test photo with a longer exposure, and then just compare. You have to know how your camera and your lens and your whole setup works. I can only explain you from my experience how my camera in this case works, or all the Sony cameras I used in the past maybe 6-7 years work. But I used before that Canon DSLRs, and with Canon DSLRs I usually turn the image stabilization on the lens off. Those are my general camera settings whenever I photograph. There is no specific one setting. Every situation is different, every light is different as well. So whenever you see an image of me, maybe in my coffee table book, maybe on Instagram or somewhere else in the videos where I tell specific settings, you can never really take exact the same settings in your situation, because your situation might be different from light, just from your camera, from your lens, from everything else. So you can take it as a general estimation, but more important is, okay, close the aperture a little bit. Okay, make the shutter speed last. Okay, make the ISO start at 100 and so on. So I hope I helped you with this lesson. If you have any more questions, let me know, and I wish you a lot of fun taking photos. In this video, we talk about focus and how I set my focus for landscape photography. In general, I use most of the times manual focus, because manual focus gives me full control over my depth of field, over where I focus on, and I don't accidentally focus on the wrong part of the image. Also, it is very useful when you use filters like ND filters or graduated filters, because it's easier for the camera than when I set everything on manual and the camera does not have to use the autofocus and is pumping all the time. And sometimes even it does not work when you use very strong ND filters to even use the autofocus. That's why I just started to use manual focus all the time, and it is actually quite simple because it works just super easy when you know how to use it, and I will show you now how I use it. I'm on 16mm full frame here. On APS-C this would be maybe 11 or 10 millimeters, and The great thing about wide-angle lenses, especially ultra-wide-angle lenses like this one, is that you have a very big depth of field. So a huge area is already in focus. It's just like with using maybe a GoPro or your screen or your cell phone on wide angle mode. A lot of stuff is already super sharp. So when you set the focus once correct, and not everything is blurry, but once you just set the correct focus, then a lot of stuff in the image is already sharp, because not only of the aperture, but because only of the focal length. When you would use a longer focal length, less would be in focus. You have a shallower depth of field because of the longer lens then. So this is an advantage I'm already using when I focus. And as mentioned, I go on manual focus. So this is the first thing I set here now on the camera. Go on manual focus. Maybe you have to turn it on here or the autofocus off in front of your lens here, somewhere on the side. Maybe you have to turn it just off or on here in your menu of the camera. Usually it's the FN button here with Sony cameras, or Q button with Canon cameras, or I with Nikon cameras. So once it is turned on, when I now here turn that wheel on the front of my lens, I can choose where the focus is at. And the at is important because this is how focus works. A lot of manufacturers make a lot of marketing effort to say we have the best autofocus, and also smartphone manufacturers, wow, the autofocus in our smartphone is so great, but actually you don't need that often the autofocus, and especially not a super good autofocus, maybe with sports photography, maybe with animals, maybe sometimes with a shallow depth of field, maybe with an open aperture, long lens and person moving constantly front and back. Then okay, autofocus might be important, but otherwise it is quite easy to use manual focus. Because focus always works on distance, on the distance you focus at. And when I started with film photography, which was much later than digital photography, so I started digital and then tried out film photography some years later, I had a very old camera that had no autofocus. And I thought, wow, how is it even possible to focus everything manually? Of course, you can look through the viewfinder maybe when you have a DSLR, but when it's a very old camera, you don't have a DSLR with a mirror. There is no mirror, you only look through glass, you can say, and the lens then captures something else. So you have to estimate the distance on that you want to focus, then set the focus on your lens, and then you take the photo. And in film times, it was even harder because you had to wait until you had developed the photo. So maybe a few days later, or on the same evening or at night, you could see the result if your focus was correct. So now with digital, it's not that complicated, because when you focus, you can just check the image afterwards, and if you focused wrong, you can then make some adjustments to make it correct. But what I learned with that kind of photography with film was just to estimate distance, and that you just have to estimate the distance on that you want to focus in combination then with your aperture. Because depending where you focus at, in combination with your aperture, will dictate you how much is in focus in the image. What I would do in the camera, if you have that option turned on, is turn MF assist off. It might be in the head of some developer a useful feature, maybe even some photographers might use it, but I personally hate that feature. It's presetted with all Sony cameras, and what it means is as soon as you turn that focus ring here, it starts immediately to zoom in. But this is not very helpful, because usually it's zooming in on one point only, and then you have to adjust your little field and so on. When you want to use the magnifier as an extra help, I sometimes use it as well, but not the auto magnifier, but set it on a button. It's very simple. You just go in the menu, you go to custom buttons, and then you choose one button. Usually I choose a button here in the front next to the shutter button somewhere. In my case now, for example, C2. And I will just go to custom buttons, C2, and then set the magnifier. And with the magnifier then on this button, I simply click it, and then I have that little square, and I can drag it around in the image and then zoom in when I want to zoom in, when I want to magnify. It's all digital, you not really zoom in, it's all digital zoomed in. Then you can check the focus and make it more accurate if needed, or maybe when you use a lens that doesn't have the connection with the scale, you can double check it, and it's very helpful. And when you want to turn it off, you simply press the button again, and then it's gone. But it's not appearing every time, you just simply make small adjustments to your focus because I find that very annoying. And also you can use, of course, focus peaking, turn that on. I will put it on blue or on yellow because this is not appearing that much in nature. You can use that as well when you need it. I usually work mainly with the scale, and the focus peaking and as well the magnifier is an extra help I can use. So you have actually 3 options to choose from when you want to focus manually. Once this feature is turned off, the MF Assist feature, you can simply turn your ring here and then you see a little scale automatically with the Sony cameras. With some other brands you might see it as well, maybe not, maybe you have to turn it on, you have to find out in your manual. With Sony cameras you just turn it and then you have that little scale. And the scale does exactly tell you where you focus at what distance. I'm now telling everything in meters because I'm used to the metric system. When I now turn my focus wheel here all the way to the left, I start at 0.3 meters, which means I'm focused at the distance of 0.3 meters, which is 30 centimeters. So somewhere around here is now my focus. And what that also means is that depending on what aperture I use, my focus does not only, or my depth of field does not only go from this distance here, only in one straight line, but also a little in the front and also a little in the back. And this is the combination of focus and aperture. The closer my aperture is, the more my sharpness will go as well in the foreground. So maybe all the way until here, maybe even all the way until here, but I cannot focus here. I can only focus on 0.3. And then with the closed aperture in combination, it goes closer to actually my lens. And the same happens to the background. But I cannot go, and I will show you now, we have to go a little bit backwards. I cannot go from here until all the way back there at the mountains or something. I can only go with the closed aperture when I'm here focused, maybe until here. And then everything which is behind here is not in focus anymore because of physics in the lens. Let's make another example. When I now focus on maybe 1 meter of distance, which I have to turn a lot here with the ultra wide angle lens. So now I'm focused on 1 meter. 1 meter means my focus now is here, 1 meter away. It's not 30 centimeters, it's 1 meter. What that also means is now with the closed aperture, my focus goes from here until maybe here. But all the way furthermore in the background, so much more than it was with 0.3 meters. Now let's change focus again. Now on 2 meters. 2 meters means I'm not focused 30, not focused 1, but focused maybe on 2 meters distance, which is somewhere around here. And usually with a lot of landscapes, this is the distance where you start to have something of interest, maybe a lake or something else. And then usually focus goes all the way already to the back. And there are some charts, some scales, some calculators. You can look up how far the distance goes with the combination of a certain aperture. And this is then called not only depth of field, but also the hyperfocal distance. And in those charts you then see maybe when you use an f8, then you have the focus or the depth of field all the way from 2 meters to maybe 50 centimeters, 60 centimeters of distance, then it gets more blurry from your lens, and all the way in the background, maybe even to infinity, depending how close your aperture is. And what I realized on 16 millimeters is that when I focus on infinity, and now the infinity on my scale comes right next to 2 meters actually. After 2 meters, it's just a few millimeters here, I turn the lens, and then comes the laying 8, the infinity sign, with this lens, with this combination here. You can turn further, but with Sony lenses you stop right after the numbers where the infinity sign is. And what it means now, I'm actually focused somewhere around 2 meters, 3 meters maybe in distance, but it's infinity, and infinity means it's super far away. It's the furthest away you can focus with the lens. You can say it's up until the stars. From this distance, with a closed aperture, the focus now goes somewhere maybe around here, maybe 2 meters of distance with, let's say, f9. You can look that up in that chart around hyperfocal distance. So let's say we are focused from 2 meters until infinity at f8. When I now switch not f8 but maybe f16, then I'm still focused on infinity because I'm focused at infinity, but my depth of field wanders closer to my lens. And usually with f16, something around this, it's 0.5, maybe even 40 centimeters, 60 centimeters, somewhere around this range. So you can say I'm focused all the way from here until the stars. And this is why in 99% of times I can use infinity for landscape photos. And the great thing is I just set it once, blindly actually, because I don't have to see what I focus. I just look at my scale, I turn until the infinity sign comes. And now I know at 16 millimeters, with a closed aperture, 13 maybe, I can start with 11, whatever. Usually I start in the middle range. I'm focused all the way from maybe 1 meter, 1.5 meter until infinity. And when now the thing that I'm photographing, maybe the mountain, a lake or something, is in that range, everything of interest is in that range, I don't have to change anything. But as soon as something is closer to the lens, let's say it's now maybe here in this area, maybe a rock or something, then I close my aperture a little bit more and then this is in focus as well. And when the occasion appears that maybe in 1% of times I have something that is closer, maybe something here, I don't focus on that point. Why not? That's what I wanted to tell you in the beginning. When I focus here, I cannot go until infinity. The physics in the camera does not, or in the lens actually, do not work in a way that the focus with a closed aperture, when you focus in the front, goes all the way to there. It will be blurry in the background. Slightly blurry, but still blurry. That's why I will never focus on this point here, maybe unless I will do focus stacking where I do several focus shots anyway. But I will always focus then on here. Let's say 1 meter, 2 meter. Then I'm focused to here. With a closed aperture, I go to infinity and I go close to the lens, and usually that works. And then in maybe 0.1% of times where this still doesn't work, I then will do focus stacking and then just will do several exposures with several different focuses. I focused once here, once there, 2 meters and infinity, and then I will merge everything in a post-processing program together. But in 99% of times, infinity works totally fine in combination with the wide angle lens, in combination with you have to close the aperture a little bit more if something is very close to the lens, and with very close I mean 0.5 meters and closer. This is close. Everything more than this is not close for me. But I will use that close effect because of the distortion of the wide angle lens, because I want to play with foregrounds and so on. And when people are used to autofocus, they're quite amazed that I don't actually have to think anymore, because I will just have now infinity and take a photo. And then I will just wait. That's what landscape photographers most of the time do. They wait. And I just take another photo. And I don't change anything because focus did not change. Landscape did not change. My position did not change. But when my position will change, let's say to here, what do I have to do? Do I have to focus? No, just press the shutter because still infinity. When I photograph to here, do I have to change? Total different scenario. No, I don't have to change, still infinity. And that is the great thing. In 99% of times, you don't have to change. So sometimes I set my focus in the morning and then I maybe look at it around noon, check it, then I might check it again in the afternoon, and then I might check it again in the evening. But that's it, so I focus 4 times a day, you can say, but always on infinity in most of the times. So this is what I wanted to tell you. Try it out for yourself. It works best, of course, with wide angle lenses, because then depth of field is biggest anyway. It does not work that well with longer lenses, but usually longer lenses you focus anyway more in the distance, not so much in the front. So give it a try, and I look forward to your feedback. Let me show you in this video how I mount my filters. This is all I need. We have ND filters, polarizers and a graduated filter. and this is here my landscape photography lens. Usually I only use one lens for landscape photography. Sometimes I switch, but both my lenses have the same diameter here in the front, which means the size here in the front with both lenses is the same. My 70 to 200 millimeter and these 16 to 35 millimeter lens both have 72 millimeters here in diameter. And this is important because when I want to mount my filter system, I need an adapter ring. And this ring has to have the same diameter like my lens has. In this case 72 again, and it's written here in front of the lens. You just have to check for that circle with that line. This is the symbol for the diameter, and if you have two different diameters, then you need two adapter rings, or you get one adapter ring in the bigger size and then one step-up ring from the smaller lens. But usually it will be almost the same because those adapter rings are not that expensive. All right, now we screw on the adapter ring here in the right diameter onto the lens. I use here the 16 to 35 4.0 by Sony. It's now screwed on, and on this adapter ring now you usually screw or plug the polarizer when you want to use the polarizer. You not always have to use it, but I will now mount the complete set that you want to see how everything is done. So this is now a magnetic polarizer. Magnetic, very easy, just plug it on. And then you can now turn it to get the effect you want from the polarizer. If you have a screw-on polarizer, you have to screw it on. Then next we have this thing here, and this is the holder, the filter holder for my square filters, like the graduated and the ND filter. You can also have ND filters magnetic or screw-on, but I now use slide-in filters. So this is exactly the set. I use it for all my landscape shots. Next filter is the ND filter, looks like this. And I now bring it in the position closest to the lens. So not furthest to the lens, but closest to the lens. And when I use now a second filter, I bring it in front of this. So now you can imagine it like this: polarizer, ND filter, and then in front of the ND filter comes the graduated filter. Just like this. And with this set here, you have 3 different spaces. You can put something in. I now use only 2 spaces because I'm very wide angled at 16 millimeters. And usually with 16 millimeters on full frame, when you use 3 of those slots, 3 of those spaces, you will see the third one in the front a little bit in the corners. That's why I use only 2. And the polarizer is attached onto the adapter ring, so I use actually 3 filters over each other, and I don't see anything in the image. I have the full 60 millimeters on full frame with this construction here. When you use a longer lens, it's not a problem to use a step-up ring for your adapter, but when it's a wide-angle lens, you should definitely get 2 different filter adapter rings, because otherwise you might have some difficulties with your filters in very wide-angled shot in your image visible. On the corners, maybe your filter holder or something. So try to avoid that by getting then 2 different adapter rings. They are not that expensive, so it should be not a big problem. And now I can of course change maybe the ND filter to a stronger strength. I can get rid of the graduated filter if I don't need it, or I can even get rid of the polarizer if I don't need it. Simply with that mechanism here, plug it off, take the polarizer off, and then bring it back on. Important, when you bring it back on, always look that it's really on, left and right side, because otherwise it will fall down when it's not perfectly plugged in. And when I now want to bring it back in, I just do it, and as you see, I can almost do it one-handed. Bring it in, especially with the polarizer, you sometimes have to make it a little pop, like this, that it's in, and then you can even turn it here from the side with that side wheel. This of course is with this filter system, but in general almost every filter system is the same. And that's it. That's how you attach your filters onto your lens. As mentioned before in some other lessons, you can use all of your filter combined. I do it as well, but you don't have to use every filter all the time. Each of those filters has a different reason to use. You can combine them, but you don't have to. But you know now how it's done.
Hi, I'm Simon d'Entremont and I'm photographing grizzlies in my favorite photography jacket, made by Hochland. It comes in 3 different layers, which you can combine together in 7 different ways. It's amazing to keep me dry, warm, and comfortable. And for those of you who've been out shooting wildlife, you know layers are so important, as changes in conditions can make you want to change what you're wearing, and it's nice to have great product that comes in different layers that you can mix and match depending on the conditions. It also has a built-in photo bag, and it also has built-in pouch for your lens cloth. It's amazing innovation for photographers.
Next filter I want to talk more detailed about is the ND filter. And the ND filter is one of the most effect filter, I would say, which has the biggest effect on your image. You can today, with image processing, with some smartphone software that is available, maybe also in the future as well with bigger cameras, imitate the look what the ND filter does in the image, but not always. So I would always recommend you to use an ND filter because it has an effect on your shutter speed. Let me show you how this filter looks. This is a weak ND filter, a square ND filter, and ND filters work like sunglasses. So with this weaker one, you can see me maybe behind it still, but with stronger ones, you cannot see me anymore. They are that strong that they block all the light, just like sunglasses do. And the effect it has in the camera is that you can make your shutter speed longer. And with a longer shutter speed, you can then have some effects in your image. Maybe you watched some lessons in my basic photography course for beginners. There we tested around with shutter speeds. And maybe you photographed as well in the evening or in the morning when the sun was not there, or when it's just shady, or when it's just a little bit darker. Then you can use a longer shutter speed without having anything on the camera. But whenever you have maybe the sun out, very low but out, or you have just daylight but want to make a longer exposure, you cannot do this because the camera is limited. The aperture is closed, more than 22 is not possible with most lenses, and also the quality decreases the more the aperture gets closed. That's the moment when the ND filter comes into play. So I use the ND filter, for example, at the sea, with waterfalls, for everything where water is involved. But not only water, you can make smooth, silky, that nice effect that you might have seen in many of my photos or from other photographers that do landscape shots. You can also use it for clouds. You can use it for people. You can use it for cars. For everything that is moving, you can use that effect. You can, for example, make things disappear. Persons, cars and so on, make a street look empty. You can make the clouds look smudged, blurry. And actually blurry is the right word, because everything that you photograph with a longer exposure gets blurred. And the silky, smooth effect you have in the image is blur. And usually in landscape shots, everything is sharp, in focus. There's not much blur in the background, not much in the foreground, maybe sometimes in the foreground, but in the background definitely not, because you use wider lenses, and when you photograph a landscape, everything is further away. But with a longer exposure and with that smudge, that blur, you can make things look blurry that are usually super sharp. And then make a huge mountain pop out, just like a wildlife shot, just like a portrait shot where you photograph the subject pops out from the blurry background or from the foreground. And the exact same effect you can do then with your longer exposure. With a creek, with a waterfall, you get that nice movement effect. So you can really make a movement. It's depending a little on your shutter speed and what you want to achieve, how it looks in the end. And I will have some lessons here where I show you how to use the ND filters in different scenarios, when to use what ND filter, because as mentioned, there are different strengths. And I use all three strengths. Sometimes I even combine 2 or sometimes even 3 strengths with each other, and then a polarizer and then an ND filter. That is just insane, but you can do it, of course. I would definitely recommend you to get yourself an ND filter or maybe even 3 different strengths. Then you are super flexible and can use it for almost every scenario and no matter what light you're using. You can use it in pure daylight, you can use it in the morning, in the evening, when the sun is over the horizon, when it's below the horizon. Whatever shutter speed you want to achieve, you can get that with an ND filter or several ND filters. Fun fact, we are also filming right now with an ND filter to get a blurry background or more blurry background to get the right shutter speed. So also with filming, ND filters are quite common. And as I mentioned in another lesson before, maybe you've watched it, that I don't use variable ND filters that you can switch in strength for landscape photography, because I cannot calculate, and calculation is important when I want to stack several filters. It's okay to get started, okay to use it when you have one, but I would get stiff or steady ND filters that have one strength only and then stack it over each other and not a variable. Variable is great for filming, but I would not use it for landscape. That's it with ND filters. In this video, I'm using an 8x ND filter and show you in what scenarios you can use that filter perfectly. Again, 8x ND filter means 8 times longer of shutter speed. It's a very light filter. Don't expect too much from this light filter, but it's exactly for that purpose, to make slightly a longer shutter speed. Let's say you have 1/8 of a second and you want to achieve 1 second of exposure, 8x ND filter. You have 1 second and want to achieve 8 seconds, 8x ND filter. But you want to achieve 30 seconds and it's 1 second, not 8x ND filter. So that simple. Usually I use it around creeks and waterfalls and in forests where it's already a little bit darker because of the shadow from the trees. And usually I try to photograph those scenarios only when it's a shady day. So when there's a sunny day, I don't photograph in the forest unless I know the creek or whatever I want to photograph is in the shadow at a specific time, maybe when the sun is low or when it's at a specific position and there's maybe a cliff blocking or something, then I go photographing, but it has always to be in the shadow. This is very, very important with creeks, because otherwise you will have very bright areas, very dark areas, even with a graduated filter or whatever, it looks not that beautiful. I try to avoid that at all cost. In the scenario we are here, I was at a beautiful creek in France, Brittany, and it was very mossy, very nice, small waterfall, great scenario. And usually in that situation, I also use a polarizer. And a polarizing filter gets you rid of reflections, but is also like a little ND filter. So it makes the image already a little darker. So in this scenario now, I did 2 things. First, I did only an image without a polarizer, with a normal shutter speed. Then I used my polarizer on it to see the effect of the polarization, to see more contrast, more colors, get rid of the reflections. You see it looks more beautiful, more green, more lush. And then I put on an 8x ND filter. And with the ND filter, now the effect that I want is a longer shutter speed, but not super long, but a little longer. And because it's already a little bit in the shadow, I can go very easily to the exposure time I want to, and very easily go to maybe half a second, 1/8 of a second, try something with 2 seconds with a more closed aperture, and so on. And you can see the effect in the image is very beautiful, very silky, very nice. And then I just look for composition. So once I have the settings, the filters and everything adjusted, I don't need to put everything off and put everything on again later. I just leave it on. The light is constant because it's in the shadow anyway, or a cloudy day, and then I walk around and take more photos of beautiful waterfalls. And you can now too with the 8x ND filter. In this video, we talk about the 64 times ND filter and when I usually use it. 64 times, again, means the shutter speed gets 64 times longer, which is easiest to remember when you have 1 second of shutter speed. 64 means 1 minute, almost. And with 1/60th of a second, you get to 1 second of exposure time with this filter. And usually I use that filter around sunrise or sunset when the sun is visible, because usually the strength is that strong that I can do 30 seconds of exposure while the sun is setting or going up, or after it's went down, or before it's about to go up. So around this area. This is also my favorite area. Whenever I want to do a longer exposure around that time of day, I usually take the 64 times ND filter. Of course, I can also combine it with the polarizer, but usually I don't do it too much at the sea, only if I want a certain look in the image, maybe when I have a small pool in the foreground that I want to get rid of the reflections or something, but usually I use only the 64 times ND filter, and then maybe as well a graduated filter depending on the sky situation. But I went here on a beautiful rocky beach in France, Brittany, and I made some exposures for you. One exposure is without any filter, so just a random exposure, some random settings I took to get the shot as it was there, sunset situation. And then I put on my 64 times ND filter. And as you can see already, the water gets super smooth because I could get that long, nice exposure now. And of course, the darker it gets, the more you have to adjust the different settings, like maybe open your aperture, like maybe increase your ISO. Usually in that situation, I then start with a closed aperture, like maybe f18, f16, and then open and open and open the aperture more until I reach maybe f8 or something. But sometimes I also increase ISO to stay then at that specific shutter speed I need. And I made another image with the adaptation of a graduated filter. And as you can see, now the combination of the long shutter speed together with that beautiful sky up there, it's just amazing. It looks beautiful. And that's what you can do as well. Just use the long exposure in combination with the ND filter and then add that graduated filter for the nice dramatic sky, and you get a beautiful image of the sea. In this video, we talk about the 1000 times ND filter and when to use it and when not to use it. So 1000 times, again, means 1000 times longer of shutter speed. So 1 second of shutter speed with no filters gets you to 1000 seconds, which is super long. So try to avoid that filter when it's already a little bit darker. I usually use that filter around sunset situation as well. So when there's still light available and I want to get to 30 seconds. So whenever I need extreme, let's call it extreme long shutter speeds, like 30 seconds, I use usually the 1000 times ND filter. But you cannot use the 1000 times ND filter in pure daylight and then expect it to go to 30 seconds because it's only 1000 times. And in simple terms, I already talked about that in another lesson. When you have 1000th of a shutter speed and put on 1000 times ND filter, you get 1 second only. Not 30 seconds, but 1 second only. So usually you then, in these situations, when it's daylight or when you have a lot of light and you want a long shutter speed, you need 2 filters. And you can easily combine them. It's super simple to combine ND filters. And you can also use 2 ND filters, polarizer and graduated filter, also no problem. But you only have to calculate 1 filter first and then second filter. And this is the reason why I don't use variable ND filters for landscape photography, because you cannot calculate, because you do not know what amount of darkness do I have right now, because there's no real scale on that variable ND filters, only maybe dots or only an amount of strength, but not the real number behind it. So let's say you're at day and you have 1000th of shutter speed, very simple example, and you want to achieve 30 seconds of exposure time. So let's just say you put on 1000 times ND filter and you get to 1 second, very simple. So when you want to now come to 8 seconds, what filter do you add? 8 times ND filter, because 1 second plus 8 times ND filter, 8 seconds. When you want to get to 1 minute, you take 1 second and 64 times ND filter. Very simple. Combined with 1000 times, because you started with 1000th of shutter, 1000 times ND filter gets you to 1 second, and 64 times ND filter on it, 64 seconds. This is how to use ND filters in general, and it's more complex when you have different fractions, when you don't have 1000s. With 1000s it's very easy, but when you have like 500s or 250s, then it's a bit more complicated, but that's when I then use charts. And I have one example here for you as well, where I was in France standing at a beautiful cliff around sunset time it was. And I first did a photo without any filters, just of the sea, just plain sea, no foreground, no real waves or something, only the sea with the cliffs. And it looked very rough and just sharp as well, because as mentioned before, when you do a longer exposure, you get blurriness in your image, and you can lead the view and make an image look more interesting and more artistic in one way. So I did one photo with only a faster shutter speed, and all the waves were visible, all the sharpness of the waves was visible, and I wanted to get rid of it. That's why I used then the 1000 times ND filter. And the 1000 times ND filter in this case made it very smooth. And I could make a longer exposure, and you can see the images next to each other now, one without ND filter and one with the 1000 times ND filter. Again, in the right light. When it would be brighter, I needed 2 of those ND filters. And I then also added a small polarizer to give the nice look of the polarizer on the sea, a little bit more green, a little bit more blue in the water, a bit more the colors, very beautiful. And then as well, I put in the gradient filter. And as you can see now, the sky is more beautiful. I can even make the foreground maybe a little bit brighter by opening maybe the aperture or increasing the ISO or increase the overall brightness, you can say, in the image. And then bring in the graduated filter and only decrease brightness in the top part where the sky is, or bring in more details where the sky is, make it more dramatic in this area. And this is usually how I use 1000 times ND filter. I used it at lakes, like Lake Moraine, for example, beautiful image of Lake Moraine, also polarizer, graduated filter and ND filter combined with this image. I used it in Vancouver Island, beautiful with that. Actually, there was a heron sitting, a real bird, 30 seconds, did not move on that rock, long exposure. Also, I used a polarizer in this image and 1000 times ND filter to make it look more beautiful, and it gives you a lot of freedom with exposure. But again, it's a strong filter, actually a super strong filter. Don't use it when the sun already set, because then it might be that it's too long of shutter speed. You can of course try it out, but just make your own experiences. And sometimes you have to even combine it with other filters to make it stronger. But in general, fun filter, and I wish you also a lot of fun. In this video, we talk more about the polarizing filter. And as mentioned before, you have different options to choose from what polarizers you get, but it doesn't really matter because all do the same. They get rid of certain waves in the light and therefore get rid of reflections in, for example, water surfaces. But it's not only getting rid of the water reflection, but also in all other areas of the image. I always tell my students when we do, for example, photography at some creeks, look at the image before and after when we are at the creek, and look how different the image looks overall, not only in the creek. In the creek you will see a huge difference, but also on the leaves, on moss, on rocks, on maybe muddy areas. Everything that has a slightly glance, everything that shimmers a little bit is gone. So you have very pure colors, and especially at rainy, foggy, hazy days, it's beautiful, and those are usually the days when I'm photographing anyway, those creeks and waterfalls. So you have a huge effect in the image, and it's a huge difference not using the polarizer. All right, I brought you some images. Here you can see great the before and after. One example is of course from a creek. You see perfectly how everything is more saturated, more vivid, more beautiful, more lush, more green, and it's a nice effect. I would always use it when you photograph those scenarios. But also at the beach, for example, I'm here at a sandy beach. You have a little puddle in the foreground, you have some rock, and you have some small stream of water going down there next to the rock. And when I use the polarizer, you see, wow, everything gone. Just pure color, nice contrasty image, looks beautiful. But be careful, sometimes you want that look. So you have to decide as a photographer. That's why every filter is not an always on filter. You have to decide when I use this filter and when I want the reflection. Because sometimes here, for example, in this example, here it looks more beautiful with the reflection than without the reflection. It looks interesting without reflection, but it looks, I find personally, then better with a reflection. So best is to just do both. When you're at the location, try it out. Just try it, look at it, take the images, don't delete it, just look at it at home, all in silence, and then decide. You can always throw them away, but better have them than not have them. And then again, as mentioned, you can combine filters. Use the polarizer in combination with ND filter. Maybe 8 times, maybe 64 times, whatever you want. And then of course you can bring in as well a graduated filter, no problem. What I said already in the beginning of this course, when you use the polarizer, you always have to turn it. Remember that. So when you are at a situation where you're photographing and you don't have a slide-in polarizer, but a turn polarizer, circular polarizer, you always have to turn it. So you cannot expect to just pop it on your camera and take the image and it looks beautiful. No, it won't. Maybe by circumstances, yes, but you have to turn it. So turn, 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 turn. And I turn very fast. A mistake a lot of beginners do is turn too slow, like this. And then, oh, nothing happens. Why? Nothing happens. Like this, I turn it, and then you really see the difference on the screen. And also try to look through the viewfinder, not only over the display. When you have focus peaking on, maybe try to turn focus peaking off if you don't see anything. Sometimes it helps me to have focus peaking on, because then I see all those little ants walking around, and in the moment the reflection goes away, the ants disappear in some areas because the reflections go away. So this can be a helper, but sometimes cannot be. Just try it out for yourself. But in general, keep in mind always to turn it. And when you change from landscape to portrait mode, also you have to turn the polarizer. And when you change back to landscape mode, turn that polarizer again. Wish you a lot of fun. See you in the next lesson. In this video, we speak about graduated filters. As mentioned before, graduated filters are amazing to level the exposure in your image, to make the sky darker and the foreground still bright and beautiful, or the other way around, make the foreground darker and the sky remains beautiful, for example, for astrophotography or for some other scenarios where you just have not the same amount of brightness in your image and you want to level it with a gradient. In general, I use gray gradient filters, not colored filters. I've mentioned this before as well. Gradient filters you don't use every day, you don't use in every scenario. When the sun is up, like it's now, we are filming around noon in the shadow, then you don't use a graduated filter because it's just too bright. Whenever you can match the amount, like around sunset, around sunrise, then it's perfectly to use that filter. You can use it directly in the sun, but usually my rule of thumb then is to use it maybe max 2 fingers above the horizon with the sun. And when it's higher, like 3 or 4 or 5 fingers above the horizon, it's too bright. You cannot level that amount of brightness, because keep in mind what we learned with the ND filters. It's the same with the graduated filters, because they are actually ND filters, but with a gradient. And it means you have, let's say, an 8 times ND filter, 8 times make the shutter 8 times longer. 8 times is not that huge, it's light. And you have to imagine you have a light graduated filter. So you cannot really make the sun dark or make a super bright sky darker with only 8 times. And then again, as mentioned before, the 8 times is only in the upper part, not where the real gradient is, only in the top part where it's a little dark. There is the main darkness. That's why I use 16 times darkness, or in other terms 1.2 ND with my gradient filters I have, because it's a little darker and it gives me a little bit more flexibility. And we also have 2.0, which is more than 64 times in longer off shutter speed, which is then actually pretty strong and gives you even more flexibility. And sometimes you can pull it a little bit more down, and then it gives you the slight longer shutter speed already, like a normal ND filter, and as well a gradient. So yeah, it's depending on the taste and what you want to achieve, but don't expect that gradient filter to be super strong, because it's not. It's the name actually written already on it, 8 times or 0.9 ND in this case. So it's only light, and I usually use it around sunrise and sunset. So let's start with the first filter. The first filter I usually use is a soft filter. I use it most of the times. A soft gradient is best to level everything, and also with mountains, or also with scenarios where you have not a straight horizon but a curvy horizon, you can use that soft gradient beautiful. And I have here some examples for you where I have not used the graduated filter, and then I slide it in the graduated filter, and you can see it's a huge difference already in the raw file. Usually I do it like this when I photograph. I try to overexpose the overall image by 1 step, which means +1. In the camera. So when you play your 0 game, when you have usually your exposure maybe on 0, don't go on 0 with the graduated filter, but go on +1. You can also look for your histogram when you have a histogram on, and look that the histogram in the sky is already giving you a little mountain there, and already is maybe cut off. So it means you are overexposed in one part of the image. It's +1 in overall exposure, but you only want that for the foreground, because usually the most bright point in your image is the sky. So what you do then, you use your graduated filter and you bring it in now when you are +1 overexposed, and then you slide it in all the way until you reach 0. That's what most people don't do. That's why some people get frustrated when they use graduated filters, because they don't understand how to level it right. And this is a very simple way. +1, slide it in, 0, done. It might not look super dramatic in your image at the moment, but you perfectly matched the exposure and have now in the raw file all the things you need, and you still can later add some second gradient in Lightroom, in Camera Raw, whatever, to make it more dramatic, more dark, but you have the information stored in the image, and the foreground is bright enough and poppy, and it gives you that nice just contrast to each other. That's why I use it all the time, the graduated filter, especially around morning and evening, and in the way I just described it. So slightly overexposed, bring it in, perfect exposure. Second filter I use is the hard gradient, and hard, the name already says it, has a hard gradient. So you actually have like a hard cut in the image, but when you look very close at it, it's not like a super hard cut, but there is some very soft gradient in it, but the edge is harder than with a soft gradient. But what it does, it's very good when you use a longer lens, like when you use a Tele lens, for example, I want to use a graduated filter as well, or when you zoom in on 35, then the effect is a little bit stronger, but still on 16mm is also a nice effect, especially when you are at the sea, when you are in situations where you have a straight horizon, you can use that hard gradient very good, and then have a super dark sky, because there it's not like the top part is 8 times or 16 times ND and then it gets weaker in the middle part and the bottom is 0. You can say there it's like 8 times or 16 times 0. Like this, so very hard edge, and you have a very hard effect. You can use it perfectly also around sunset, around sunrise, when the sun is still there, it gives a nice ball. It has almost the effect like a reverse gradient filter has, but the difference is that the top part is also dark and does not fade to 0 as well. That's why I prefer personally the effect of the hard gradient. Hard gradient I do not use as often as mentioned, but when I use it, I love the effect, and especially in clean compositions, like when you have a clean foreground at the sea, you have a straight horizon, nice sky, maybe the sun as just a dot, as a nice big round thing at the sky, then it's perfect to use. So both filters are definitely in my pack, and I can choose whatever I want to use most. In this video we talk about Tele lens or wide-angle lenses for landscape photography. What makes sense and what are the advantages and maybe the disadvantages with both of them, because both of them have advantages and disadvantages. Let's start with the wide-angle lenses. Wide-angle lenses in general, I love to photograph landscapes with, because with wide-angle lenses you see a lot in the landscape. So when you imagine a big mountain, you can easily get it on your camera sensor, on your picture, when you use a wide-angle lens. Vice versa, when you use a Tele lens, you don't get the whole mountain on your camera, you only get maybe the peak or a part of the mountain on the image. On the opposite, with a wide-angle lens, you always have a lot of foreground involved, because you have that much of angle available, that wide of angle available. You always see what is right in front of you, and you cannot blend that out very easily. Therefore, you always have to look for something in the foreground, and it's a little more difficult to find a composition with a wide-angle lens. You can play with that distortion effect that everything is further away, because when you have a mountain and you have it in the image, it's actually further away. It appears further away than it might be actually. You can also see it when you use your smartphone and then use maybe an ultra-wide-angle lens and then change it to the Tele lens. It appears further away when you use the wide-angle lens. And also your foreground is visible. You can use a nice effect with that distortion with the foreground, because the closer you go to a foreground, the more it blows up because of that visual effect of the wide-angle lens. But you need to go that close to the foreground, because otherwise the foreground, even if you are only 1 meter away from the foreground, is just small in the image because of that distortion effect. But when you go, let's say 30 centimeters close or 50 centimeters close to your foreground, it will look almost double as big as it looks from 1 meter of distance. So you can really play, you can make a small flower appear big in the foreground, big in your image, almost half the image, then is maybe a tiny flower, and in reality it's only a little tiny flower. With a wide-angle lens you can make that distortion effect very good, but you need to control it, and you need to get used to control it, because otherwise your images will look a little empty and a little bit maybe lost. And this is what I find even myself as a professional photographer when I use two wide-angle lenses. With two wide-angled, my personal taste starts at 14mm full frame or even 12mm full frame. It's just too much for me. It's then that GoPro effect where you have just a lot in the image, but you have to fill it. And sometimes it can look beautiful when you have a nice composition, but it's much tougher, I find personally, to do it with 12 or 14mm than to do it with 16mm full frame. 16 is like my sweet spot for wide-angle lenses when you want to photograph landscapes. But maybe just because I'm used to it, because I used it for over a decade now with that angle. Sometimes I even go a little bit zoomed in, maybe on 20mm, 24, 28, 35. And what then happens is that everything that is further away comes a little closer and your view gets a little more focused. And this can be interesting for composition, but that also means when you have something very close in the foreground, you might not get it in the frame together with something big like a mountain, a tree, or something you want to compose it with. So the closer you zoom, the more you zoom in, the more your view gets focused and the less you have that distortion effect of foreground, middle ground, background, and so on. But it's really useful and really helpful to try out the zoom sometimes, because you can make things that are further away look a little more closer and can actually then have the effect of, wow, I have never looked at this with this perspective, because our eye perspective usually is something with full frame around 50mm and with APS-C around 35mm. So whenever you show something that is not in that view range that you are used to, then it looks interesting. And there comes the 70 to 200mm, so a Tele lens, into play. This is why I sometimes use for landscapes, especially a longer lens. Even though you would think, a longer lens for landscape is not that useful, but yes it is, because you can really concentrate on only parts, only small parts of something that is otherwise with a wide angle huge, like a mountain. Let's take that example, a mountain. you have the huge mountain, nice foreground, boats, fog on top of the mountains, but you only want to concentrate on the hill, on the mountain, on the peak with that fog, because that part looks beautiful. Maybe there's some snow involved or something. You cannot really show that with a wide angle because the mountain will look kilometers away. It's a small mountain only, and the fog and the snow is just very, very small. But with the tele lens, you can compress the image, you can focus more on that point, and it looks very interesting. And because it's not common to see only that small part, it looks interesting on the photo as well. This is a huge advantage with tele lenses, but also it's very difficult to use tele lenses because tele lenses first, you have to use most of the time when it's a little bit darker with a tripod because you have that long of focal length and will otherwise blur the image handheld. With 16mm, it's much easier to use a slower shutter speed. 200mm, you need a pretty fast shutter speed or high ISO already. With a tele lens, in general, you have less depth of field. And what that means is that only a small area in the image is in focus. Even though you might use a closed aperture like f13 or something, still something that is more in the foreground will be less sharp, less in focus than it would be with a wider lens. So the more wide-angled you are, the more depth of field you have, the sharper everything in the image is, and the harder actually it is to make something a little bit blurry in the image, like a foreground, when you want on purpose to have something blurry. With a tele lens, it's much easier, but it's much harder on the opposite way to get everything in focus. And also because that area is so shallow that you focus on, it might happen that when you use manual focus, that you really have to concentrate that the right point in your image, the right area in your image is in focus. So sometimes with a tele lens, I also use autofocus because otherwise it might focus on the wrong part of the image, or just I have slightly overturned it, slightly underturned it. So sometimes it's a help to use the autofocus with a longer lens. Both are great lenses, and both lenses I have in my backpack with me, but I would say for my photography, 90% of the time I use this lens combination, 16-35, and only 10% I use maybe the tele lens. But it's good to have when you need it, and it's a lot of fun to shoot with, and sometimes it's a great challenge or just practice for yourself to only use one lens, to only use a tele, only use a wide angle lens, because then you get more creative, because you really need to move, you really have to look through the camera, through the lens to see the composition right. Wish you a lot of fun using both lenses. Thank you for watching this course. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you did so, write me a review at learnfromben.com and check out the other courses. I wish you some amazing photos.
This video is part of my photography legacy. Over a period of 5 years, I will publish my courses from learnfromben.com for free, but with ads here on YouTube. So everyone can benefit from my knowledge regardless of budget. So subscribe to the channel now and spread the word. And do you want all 9 courses from the last 10 years immediately, bundled together and without advertisement at a super affordable price? Go now to learnfromben.com and get the XXL Bundle as an instant download or stream via the website www.learnfromben.com. More than 22 hours of the finest learning content on photography, filming and image editing in all levels of skill. Link is in the description and also in the comments below. And when you're on the website, check out the sales section with my signature tripods and defilters and books. Everything is on sale up to 60% off, as long as stocks last. Thank you for your support. Videos from the courses are published every Friday at 5:30 p.m. German time. My name is Benjamin Jaworskyj and I wish you all some really good photos.